Hello, welcome to Truth Sentinel, watching over the truth in the news. This is episode 42, and today we'll be looking at everything related to conspiracy theories, perhaps answering the question, do they help or hinder the search for the truth? And we'll be getting feedback and different opinions from contributors and listeners. We'll be talking to Anthony, who kindly put together a big part of the segment today, and we'll be also hearing some music from one of our listeners, John, and it's music with lyrics of hope, which I heard today. It's always good to have some hope, especially when you've got people like David Cameron who've just come back into power. We'll be having a quick look at the news first, then going to Anthony, listen to his segment, and then listen to the music, and finally we'll be checking in with Seth Davis from Two Real News, who'll be giving us his take on conspiracies and conspiracy theories. So settle back, relax, and don't forget to comment and share our video. Thank you very much. Goodbye. Quick unplanned news roundup. Look at what's going on around the world according to mainstream news. Massive display of military might going on in Russia, celebrating the Victory in Europe Day. Also going on here in Ukraine, lots of fireworks and celebrations and drinking. North Korea testing a submarine missile with Kim Jong-un looking on as this missile comes out of the water. So it's clear that as a human race we haven't really learned an awful lot from the millions of people killed in previous wars. Obviously news dominated by reaction to UK election results as Cameron comes back into power. An unfair voting system. I don't know why there's a question mark there. It should be a statement, surely. Maybe that's a mistake. Watching the coverage on the BBC of the elections, it was just a bit nauseating. Scotland, if they've got any sense, will vote to leave the UK. But I don't think the UK government will allow them to do that. They'll try anything to stop it happening, and I mean anything. What else is going on? How Cameron's Conservatives won it? That actually should be a serious question, not a statement. Article here on what are the limits of free speech. Personally, as I've said before, I believe you can say whatever you want, but deal with the consequences. And there's the story about the Pope saying he'd punch someone if they insulted his mother. I think someone should test that theory. Expat shock at coming home. If you do go away for a year or so and come back, you are sometimes shocked at how things have changed, not always for the better. What happens after we die? You know, not enough people actually think about that question. I've always been surprised how people don't even think about it. It's probably one of the most important questions we can ask. So from deaths to births, the royal baby was born, with the usual nauseating scrutiny from the media. Here's our Twitter site where we post some of our comments, sometimes during the week when we've got time. Oh look, there's an advert for our Truth Sentinel t-shirts. We don't do an awful lot of advertising, but it does help us if people support us by buying a t-shirt. $20, email scottsentinel9@gmail.com with your size and address. We just have a look at what other people are saying. Look, there's our great leader Kim Jong-un, and the BBC were proudly showing the route of his car to the palace, where he was going to meet the Queen, kiss her feet presumably, sacrifice a baby goat maybe, and pledge allegiance to Satan. I might be exaggerating there, or maybe not, who knows. Yeah, the BBC coverage. I think the presenter couldn't hide his delight that Cameron was back in power, but look, there's the police officer realising he needs to guard Cameron for another 4 or 5 years. What else is going on? This is CNN website now. This is real economy class. A boy travelling in a suitcase. I'm not sure it was his idea though, but thankfully he lived. Pentagon spends big on porn and gambling. Maybe that's what the trillions of dollars that went missing are being spent on. Could ants and lizards transform the world of work? You know, I've often wondered that. I'm sure you have too. North Korean kids taught devotion to the supreme leader, as our kids and adults as well on TV are taught to devote their energies and time to watching our great leader Kim Il-sung. So today we're going to be talking about conspiracy theories, and there's a lot of conspiracy theories that started off that way but turned out to be true. This is the Kuwaiti girl who testified on behalf of the US government that the Iraqi troops were doing terrible things to infants. It turned out to be lies, and this was exposed by a journalist. The CIA were paying witnesses. Okay, this is things we have to remember about some conspiracy theories. Watergate, of course, I'm not going to go into the details, but look into that and how that started off as a conspiracy theory, but ended up with the president stepping down. CIA smuggling cocaine. I believe Seth is going to talk a bit more about that later, about the journalist Gary Webb, who mysteriously ended up committing suicide with 2 shots to the head. Quite difficult to do. The syphilis study where African American men were tested and deliberately given exposure to syphilis. This resulted in hundreds of people losing their lives. It started off as a conspiracy theory. Apologised for Clinton. Then we've got the famous Gulf of Tonkin incident, which helped bring America into the Vietnam War. Torpedo boats attacking a US ship. Apparently it never happened, but millions of people lost their lives during the Vietnam War, and we're going to be talking about the Vietnam War in a upcoming episode, talking about how the horrors of ISIS that you see these days, they're pretty similar to the horrors you saw in the Vietnam War as well. The West are capable of terrible atrocity too. Then we have Operation Paperclip. This is where Nazi scientists came over to the US and continued their experiments. Check out Plum Island and what went on there. Of course, it's difficult to know how many of these things are true because, the media these days don't necessarily investigate enough. Let's go and check out our voicemails.
Hi Scott, I thought I'd just message about the question, do conspiracy theories help or hinder the quest to find truth in events around us? And I take issue with the question and ask, can we group all modern conspiracy theories together like this? Well, no, of course we can't, but people do, and this is perhaps a hindrance of conspiracy theories. So for example, if they did X, 9/11, blah blah blah, then they definitely did Y, put microchips in our cornflakes or something like this. And that's an issue I have with conspiracy theories. Their approach is often overarching and something that fits only one narrative. So sort of we have the answers, now let's ask the questions to get those answers. Equally in this question, well, what does truth mean in this context? Truth in events. So we have the events, we know the details, we know all the information about these events, but now we just need the truth about this event. Well, this doesn't actually sound like truth. It sounds like an interpretation of an event. Interpretation, meaning understanding a person's perspective. And everyone has a perspective and an agenda in reporting, including people who make conspiracy theories. And conspiracy theories often ignore that themselves. Something to think about.
So thank you, Luke, for your very intellectual response to tweets we sent out asking for people's opinions on whether conspiracy theories hinder people's quest for the truth. Luke mentioned that we know the details. I would say sometimes we don't know the details, or often we don't know the details or all the facts, and there's a deep mistrust of the official version of events, and probably a healthy mistrust, I would say. And that people try to fill in the details themselves sometimes, yes. If you have a conspiratorial mind, I suppose I do to a certain extent, then yes, you'll fill in the details. But I think you need to, if you're going to do that, you need to fill in the details using logic, or investigate and try to find more facts. You can't really group all conspiracy theories together, and therefore, can you really label someone a conspiracy theorist? Because there's lots of conspiracy theories, you know. If you believe that 9/11 was an inside job, do you also believe in UFOs, aliens, the Bermuda Triangle, Bigfoot? Not discounting any of those, but, you know, you can't... People have different opinions about a lot of those things. So one person might question some events about some topics, but not about others. And the UFO aspect is often brought up, I find, with anyone who questions events. It's like, oh, I suppose you believe in little green aliens. Which is also strange, because if you actually do a survey amongst the entire population of your country, you'll probably find more than 50% do believe that there may be other forms of life out there. So it's a very curious thing. But anyway, let's go and talk to Anthony and ask him what his segment was about. Anthony.
Hi Scott, how are you?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks, not too bad. You very kindly offered to put together a segment for our conspiracies episode, and I just wanted to quickly check what you did, and if you could just quickly introduce your segment.
Sure, yeah. I spoke to a few different people with fairly disparate views. We watched some clips together on the topic of conspiracies. And then we just chatted, and anything that came up that was interesting, I included in the segment.
Why don't we listen to the segment and then we'll react to it afterwards?
Sounds good.
In season 1 of Truth Sentinel, one of our main focuses was the media. So we spent a lot of time asking how much truth there is in the news and whether there are other ways to look at world events and major issues. And in doing all of that, we often touched on what a lot of people call conspiracy theories. Now, of course, conspiracy theories are sometimes ridiculed in the mainstream, and the people who believe in them are labelled quite negatively in many cases. So to help get this new season underway, we decided to look into the whole area of conspiracies in a bit more detail. And we conducted some interviews to try and find some different views. We wanted to know if people think there really are such things as conspiracies, or if they're perhaps just invented to fulfill some kind of psychological need. And also, should we dismiss people who do believe in conspiracies, or should we take them seriously? Now, to help stimulate some discussion on this, we played our guests some short video clips, and then we asked for their reactions. And we're going to hear a little excerpt from the first clip now, which is by the legendary comedian Bill Hicks. But just to give a bit of context, Hicks definitely did believe in conspiracies, and he made a couple of fairly important contributions to the truth movement. But here in this clip, he's doing what he does best, which is to blend humour with some kernels of truth, or at least what he perceived as the truth. So let's hear it, and then we'll see.
Hello, it's Scott here. It's not Bill Hicks. Just thought I'd point that out. The reason being, I had to delete the Bill Hicks clip due to copyright infringement. So I've just put the text up here instead, so you can read what Bill said. But basically, he said that when you become president, you get taken into a smoky room with the industrialist fat cats that got you there, and they show you a clip of the JFK assassination taken from what appears to be the grassy knoll area, as a bit of a threat. And that when the screen goes up, they ask you if you've got any questions, with the obvious implication that you should follow their agenda. Not half as funny when I say it, but there you go. I thought I'd let you know. You can find the clip on YouTube, actually, if you just type in Bill Hicks presidency, or I'll try and put the link under the video.
So now we're going to hear a few different reactions to that, and we'll start with Morgan from Canada. Morgan currently works at a Turkish university where he teaches language and logic.
The only place that I would probably part company with them is I don't believe there are any smoky rooms in the nefarious kind of sense. I mean, I'm sure they get together and smoke their cigars and then drink their cognac or whatever it is they do. But you got to remember that the people that get into politics and that are ultimately elected, they're people that run in exactly the same social circles as all of these wealthy, powerful industrialists. They have the same friends, their kids go to the same kind of schools, they're already plugged into that way of thinking. So it's not any kind of a reach once they get into political power for them to carry out the will of their buddies who think about the world in roughly the same way that they do. They might have financial incentives that are a little bit different. But as I said, I mean, there's a revolving door between corporate America and the political system, so that when these people leave office, there are jobs waiting for them on the other side. So there's even a financial incentive there for them to acquiesce in or endorse all of these sort of economic and political designs of all these wealthy and powerful elites. They're part of the same kind of conspiracy, if you want to call it that. But again, it's not really a conspiracy, it's just reality.
Let's also hear from Nicola, a regular listener from the UK. She also works at university and her specialty is special needs education.
I think it's entirely plausible, scarily plausible. It would explain a lot about why politicians suddenly switch when they actually get any kind of power. You see them building power, and they're on your side and they're doing really good things, and then boom, they've got to the top job and suddenly nobody gives a fuck anymore.
Finally, we spoke to Walter from Manitoba in Canada. Walter's actually active in the truth movement. He maintains the BrainFeed website, which we recommend all our listeners to go and have a look at. So before we hear his reaction to the Bill Hicks clip, let's just find out a little bit about what he does.
BrainFeed is really just a website that I started a few years ago where I wanted to put up information that I thought was credible and important, that to me was important for my awakening process, my development as a human being and trying to expand my consciousness and trying to learn about the world. So I started putting up people and different researchers and different shows that I was listening to, and I put it up on my website, which is www.brainfeed.ca. So if you go there, you'll see a bunch of different researchers and presenters that I believe is probably the most credible ones out there. So you don't have to go searching through all the crazy whack jobs, although that's fun too. Yeah, and then also sometimes I do my own little videos, and I've been trying to do interviews. I'm going to be doing more interviews and doing more videos in the near future too. So that'll all be on BrainFeed and my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/BrainFeedCA. And that's where you can find information about me. My name is Walter Harris DeMello, and I'm going to be focusing on BrainFeed and trying to help develop a vehicle of change in the world.
And so what did Walter make of the ideas expressed by Bill Hicks in his bit about presidential agendas?
I'm a fan of Bill Hicks. Like he's talked about some very important issues in the past. And I think in his bit there, he really waters it down a lot for his audience. Like, I bet you if we had him around today, he would say that, oh yeah, the president going into it already knows. The reason why the guy's a president is because he's known his role up until that point, and he's played his role, and that's why he's the president. Based on my research, I only researched like American politics mostly and Canadian politics because I'm in Canada. But I would assume the UK is probably very similar, and most places like that. If you look at the corporations that run all the all the world and stuff like that, like the major corporations, like the gas and oil companies and all these energy companies and food companies, all those guys, whether for the specific country might be different companies. Like the same company that runs food in the U.S. may not be the same ones, or may not be the same ones that are controlling food, let's say in Australia or something. But they would all play a very similar role about trying to enforce certain type of politics and a certain type of development in that country. The thing about Canadians, like, we've been really sold this idea that all of our politicians do no harm and they're all like baby face kind of nice people, and we have our our peacekeepers, right? We've got the peace troops and stuff like that from the Lester B. Pearson, and so we're all sold this idea that we're all the the nice cuddly people up north, right? And the thing is, we don't really understand our involvement when it comes to like the UN, like how Canadian politicians were involved with things like the UN or Agenda 21 or any type of taking resources from other countries, right, and stuff like that, and like over mining operations. So Canada's highly involved with mining operations around the world, right? So we're connected to a lot of corruption, but people kind of ignore it because we're told in the media and everyone's kind of told that we're all like happy people that say please and thank you and all that, and that's, they kind of hold that same value when it comes to our politicians, right? They look at our politicians like, oh, they meant good, right? They're trying their best, they're just real stupid. I guess people don't really understand what it takes to get into power like that. How do you become prime minister? How many years of dedication to this religion or whatever, this political religion, does it take in order to gain that type of power and that ranking? Like, they've got there's hoops that people like Harper and the people that are involved in politics have to jump through, and there's things that they have to keep quiet in order to get to the place that they are. And I'm sure that often it involves like very corrupt behavior and very immoral behavior that if we knew about it, if the public knew about it, if the media did their job and we knew about it, we would probably feel sick to our stomachs and look at Harper and all these politicians in a very different way.
Next, we're going to hear from a guy called Rick Green, who's part of a Canadian organisation called Totally ADD. The organisation does a lot of good work for sufferers of ADD and ADHD. And on their website, Rick has a rant each week about sometimes a connected, sometimes a completely unconnected topic. Now, of course, as people with a medical condition, ADD sufferers have got direct experience with the pharmaceutical industry. And here, Rick gives his opinion on conspiracies, particularly in that industry. He doesn't agree with the Bill Hicks conception of the world, and he gives some fairly compelling reasons why. So let's hear him.
Some ADD, ADHD websites have amazing conspiracy theories that explain how big pharmaceutical companies control everything. I have my own theory. My theory is that anyone who believes that anyone can control everything watches too many James Bond movies. People who believe in vast government conspiracies or vast multinational conspiracies should actually get a job with a government or a multinational. I mean, think about it. You can't get most people to work on long weekends, let alone join in some vast conspiracy where they might get killed. And in real life, bad stuff, well, actually, it's mostly done by good people who are just struggling to make a buck or get fame, gain some respect, or get laid. Now, pharmaceutical companies are not saints, I know that. But the idea that they can control or suppress scientific studies done by thousands of researchers at hundreds of universities, not to mention all the investigative journalists, the health reporters and their editors and the camera crews, and I mean, come on. There must be an easier way to make money, right? The people behind Google and eBay, they're making a ton of money, and they're not actually manufacturing anything. Well, okay, they're producing reams of information about you to sell to advertisers. Yes, big companies often do shady things, or individuals who work at those big companies often do shady things, but vast conspiracies...
So let's hear what our guests thought of what Rick was saying there. This time we'll start with Nicola.
What he was saying about the pharmaceutical companies, they don't have to pay people to repress what they're doing because they just pay them to produce the research in the first place. So the research that comes out is geared towards the pharmaceutical companies anyway. And scientists don't really make that much. Like the people who are writing the papers don't make that much. It doesn't cost that much to get them or to give them the funding to do research on how amazing this product is. It really doesn't. And if you have any doubts about them, you just get them to sign a non-disclosure agreement, which would strip them of everything. So they're not going to do it. When I was doing my undergraduate, we were always told, in any of it, make sure you look at who sponsored the paper. Whatever you're looking at, whether it's research into, I don't know, mental health issues or medical issues or whatever, who sponsored the paper. Because they'll just flood the market with all these great things about themselves and there's no room for anything else. Having a government conspiracy, I think, would be much more difficult. Even Nixon got found out, and he was pretty good at the whole conspiracy thing. The constant surveillance that goes on in and around governments under protection, under the guise of protection, I think it's not feasible to hide something like that. I mean, even if you look at Snowden and the things that he's done, they kept it under wraps for a while, what these different laws were doing, but eventually it comes out. Depends on how long you want to keep the conspiracy.
Vaccines, are they a gigantic conspiracy?
Are you going to believe somebody who has gone to medical school, who has studied all of this information, or are you going to believe your favorite celebrity on Oprah? This is my problem. If they've gone out and they've done any kind of research themselves, they'll have learned about things like the herd immunity and the different things that you can do. I mean, if you're worried about combining drugs, for example, for the MMR vaccine was the big one, you can now get it in a separate form. You don't have to have it combined. And there have been long-term studies that have proven that people who grow up on this all-natural diet and don't put any toxins in their bodies die younger and are much more unhealthy than people who do have vaccines or, I don't know, have a Coca-Cola once in a while, and don't have this all-natural diet.
You said there's a lot of choice. Do you think pharmaceuticals put pressure on physicians to encourage people to go the whole hog and get like the whole 48 vaccines?
I think that depends on what country you're in.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly in the States, there's a lot of pressure, and they'll go around, the pharmaceutical companies will go around and send their most buxom, pretty blonde woman to buy the doctor lunch and talk about the benefits of having all of these things. Give them fancy titles of representing the company and being a speaker and things like that. That's certainly true in the States. Certainly true, and there's always a negotiation between the pharmaceutical companies and the government or the state that's paying for it. So there's always a negotiation that way too. We'll give you a good deal on X, Y, and Z. That's why also why medicine is so expensive in the States, because they don't do wholesale negotiations. They negotiate individually. But places like the UK, where you've got there's a layer in between the pharmaceutical companies and the between putting direct pressure on the doctors and putting pressure on an organization.
I would totally disagree with almost every point he made. I mean, the idea that it's easier to tell the truth doesn't make sense if you're the people in control of everything and you're the people that are profiting from the ignorance of the population, right? Because that's what they're doing. They're profiting from our ignorance. So why would they tell us the truth, and why would they tell us knowledge about everything when it would hurt their profits? So, and then on top of that, like, he brings up a few points like no one can control everything, and I have to agree that he's right in the sense that the government, especially at the lower levels, is very inefficient in that sense. But at the same time, Big Pharma, they're trying to maintain public trust, right? That's the whole idea. If they can maintain public trust, that they can continue profiting into the future. That's why they spend that much money on suppressing truth. They want people to think that they're on our side so that we trust them enough to go buy their shitty product, right? And then on top of that, it's not about controlling everything. The conspiracy isn't, and we can discuss this about in the other videos too, is that it's not necessarily about controlling everything, because everything can't be controlled. It's just about maintaining a corrupt system, right? So really, they don't have to control everything. They just have to make sure that the media doesn't, share the truth with everyone. And there's been lots of whistleblowers out there that explain that, and whistleblowers in the media that discuss how, like, they're told not to ask certain questions. They're told not to get into certain topics or whatever, right? So, I mean, there's evidence showing that the media is controlled, right? It's not a conspiracy. I mean, these guys come out and say it. All you have to do is look at secret societies, how they operate, or the CIA and counterintelligence, and the history of those type of ideas, and you can understand that the people that are in control of the system have very good experience at controlling information and controlling conspiracies and creating them and manipulating them.
I agree with part of what he's saying, in the sense that I don't think it's possible to cover up these conspiracies forever, but it's not going to stop people in power from trying if they believe that what they're doing is going to result in recriminations, public backlash. The big tech companies have been in bed with the NSA for many years now, and on a somewhat encouraging note, they seem to be mounting some of the institutional resistance now to this massive surveillance program, which was kept in secret, contrary to what some people would have us believe. It is possible to mount an organized cover-up, but not forever. In that case, you had one very principled young man who, at great personal peril to himself, came out and shared with us the very disturbing reality that we're all being spied on by our governments. As far as the ADD angle goes, patent law is a major area of the whole legal system. A lot of people make a lot of money arguing these cases, and really what it boils down to is it's a question of public protectionism. It's funny because everybody likes to wrap themselves in the mantle of free trade and so on. If we had genuinely free trade, there wouldn't be any patents. Patents is a way of the government intervening on the side of large corporations, supposedly in the interest of supporting research and development, although, my feelings there are that so much of the research and development actually comes out of the state sector anyhow, whether within the universities or state-funded research institutes, that if you were to just turn it over entirely to the state, the development of these drugs, there would be a massive public savings in money. So I don't think we need to subsidize large corporations to do the research. We can do the research very well ourselves.
Our next clip is from a documentary about conspiracies which aired a few years ago on American TV. This documentary very much tried to debunk the theories and also question the motives of the people who believed in them. So you're going to hear a psychological explanation of belief in conspiracy theories. You'll also hear a few fairly harsh critics. In particular, we're going to hear from James Magg, who works for Popular Mechanics magazine, and he was at the center of a controversy between his publication and the 9/11 Truth Movement because they asked him to check some of the official claims, and they were not happy with the results that Popular Mechanics magazine published as a result. So there was a bit of a falling out there, and we'll hear his views on conspiracy theorists. But to start us off, let's listen to our friend Alex Jones bursting a few blood vessels on his radio program. Always entertaining. Take it away, Alex.
Take action. Find out this stuff is real, and then decide what side of history you want to be on. You want to get in the ditch and lick the boots of the tyrants, or you want to get up on your hind legs and kick their butt. See you back live this Sunday, 4 to 6 p.m. Central.
Alex Jones is just one voice in a growing chorus of doubters, offering alternative explanations for world events. Explanations that offer shockingly clear answers, while the official stories may have questions and loose ends.
It looks like being certain even of something which is very terrible and very frightening. may be psychologically preferable, at least to many people, than being in doubt, being uncertain. Because if you're uncertain, you're suspended. You don't know what stance to take.
That's what the conspiratorial mind does. It looks for a simple explanation, a nice, neat pattern with a little secret, powerful force behind it controlling things. That's what our brains do.
Those so-called truthers rankle some journalists who dislike their spin on the facts.
Here's what's funny about the conspiracy theorists. They call themselves skeptical, but in fact, they are the least skeptical people you'll ever meet. They believe anything they read as long as they already agree with it.
Since 2005, Popular Mechanics magazine has been assigning teams of reporters to comb through the 9/11 details with the help of top scientists and experts.
You know, they're saying there's evidence it was a missile that hit the Pentagon, but they found the plane in the building. They tested the DNA of the passengers. They identified them. We talked to people who held pieces of the plane in their hands. We talked to people who saw the plane hit the building. So this whole notion like, well, there's a camera and it took a picture, but it's not clear, so it's probably not a plane. That's a perfectly fine debate, except in order to think that debate is meaningful, you have to ignore all this other evidence. And that's what the conspiracy theorists have gotten very good at. It isn't finding evidence, it's ignoring evidence.
So what do our listeners make of all that? Do they agree with the skeptics, or do they have different ideas?
I think there probably is something to that, in that, you know, humans are sort of meaning-making creatures, and we're probably hardwired in some sense to look for patterns to explain all the disparate phenomena and the occurrences around us. And in the sense that a conspiracy is searching for a pattern or some kind of a causal framework to understand all of those things, I think that's really just what our minds do as humans, and there's nothing, you know, psychologically unsettled about that. There's nothing that I think is, you know, abnormal. That's what scientists do in their own way. That's what we all do. I mean, I think my take on conspiracies is, you know, some conspiracies are true, some conspiracies aren't true, in the sense that, you know, if conspiracy is interpreted to mean, you know, a small group of people trying to wield inordinate political or economic power over a much larger group of people, I mean, I've got another word for that, and that's reality. That's the world that we live in. So that's the real conspiracy to me, is sort of the conspiracy of the everyday, and that's what's amazing about that is that it's accepted and embraced by most people. It's, you know, most people don't bat an eyelash at those kind of conspiracies.
What's the conspiracy of the everyday?
I think the fact that such a tiny number of people have been able to monopolize, you know, the economic, the political power, the great wealth within a society, and have been able to exercise that power without a larger number of people revolting against them. That to me is amazing in itself. And they've been able to do that really quite out in the open. I mean, they have, you know, their secret, well, not even very secret. They have their private organizations. They have, you know, some of them fraternal organizations like the Skull and Bones, or, you know, the Bilderberg Group or whatever. But I mean, they publish newsletters. Like, you can read what they're doing. It's not really happening so much behind closed doors. You know, the Council on Foreign Relations has included some of the most notable figures in foreign policy circles in the United States and the other advanced industrialized countries. And so it's not, I don't really see it as something hidden. It's something that is really very much out in the open. What is amazing to me is that most people seem to accept it.
What about the 9/11 truthers versus popular mechanics? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't put a lot of credence in most of the claims that I've heard from the truther movement, at least as far as I understand them. To me, there are problems, of course, with academia and with the scientific method and all of that. But I really do think that there's a legitimate path to, if you have discovered something very significant about the world, to publicizing your findings. And that's, you write into a journal, whether it's a specific science and engineering journal or whatever, and you take your findings to them, and they will vet them, they'll peer review them, and based on what people who are experts within these fields, what they're able to determine, that can be either verified or not. And the fact that most of them haven't, to my knowledge, I don't think most of the 9/11 truthers have ever tried to have their claims vetted in that way, makes me a little more skeptical of them.
First off, one of the sections, like one of the lines is, the official stories have questions and loose ends, and people don't like that, and that's why they believe in conspiracy theories, right? And the thing is that we have to ask questions like, why do so many official stories like 9/11 or like in the JFK assassination or like any other story out there that develops a conspiracy theory, why does it have so many questions and loose ends? And it's because the media and the government aren't answering any of the questions. They're not doing their job. So right there, anyone with a rational mind will say, well, maybe they're hiding something. Maybe there's something else more. So it's very rational to have, a theory or questions about something, especially when the media is not doing their job, And then on top of that, like I said earlier, conspiracy theories are a part of history. And I'm not going to go through all of them because, history's long, right? But if you go and look at a little bit of history, you'll see that controlling the public, the perception of the public, and controlling public opinion is really what politics is mostly about for a lot of people that were in control of politics in different times in history, right? And then another argument that's made in the video is that it's scarier to be uncertain of the facts of a specific event than it is to believe a conspiracy was involved in hiding facts. And personally, I would argue the opposite is true. If you're just uncertain of facts, that means you're just uncertain of facts and then you move on, right? But if you believe that there's some sort of conspiracy involving high-ranking officials or very powerful people, wouldn't that be a little more scarier and a little harder to deal with and a little harder to swallow? Wouldn't that, wouldn't that make people question everything about their life a little more than just saying, oh, there's uncertain facts and, that's how it is, right? So, that statement themselves that they made in that video, I would say it's the exact opposite. I don't think it holds water. There's no doubt in my mind that, there was some weird business going on in 9/11. Well, I think there's so many questions in that movement. You could spend days and days and days and days picking through all the missing facts and all the stuff that just doesn't add up. Now, was it George Bush and Donald Rumsfeld and those guys that did it? I don't know. I don't know 100% sure, but I'm sure something weird went on, and they knew about something, and they used it. So there's too many that add up to them profiting, being able to get something out of it, to further some sort of agenda, right? They're able to further their agenda, so it was a good thing for them. And if it's a good thing for them, then did they have a role in it? There's a good chance that they did have a role in it. I think any conspiracy becomes a problem when people focus in too much about it. Like the 9/11 movement. People became total diehard 9/11 truthers, and all it was 9/11, 9/11 for them all the time. That becomes dangerous because then it makes you you're going in circles. You're not getting anywhere. You're not developing. You're not growing yourself, right? If all you're thinking about is 9/11 or all you're doing research on is 9/11, then you're missing a whole other, a wider perception of what's going on. And then it can become damaging.
I'm going to annoy a lot of people, but it's the same reason why people are religious. Why would you be in doubt or think everything's going to finish at this point? Everyone wants to live forever. So having somebody say, well, if you follow this, this, and this, then you get to live forever, as long as you believe. It's a very neat, it's a very appealing package, the same way the conspiracy theories are. We don't know why people do these things. But I can tell you why. It's very appealing to most people, I would imagine. Most people are just more skeptical than that.
What about ignoring evidence? Do you think that people reach a point where they start to?
Of course. Because they've got their perfect worldview. They've got, even whether it's terrifying or not terrifying, they've got their idea. Everything makes sense, everything fits, except for this extra piece of puzzle over here. We'll just throw that in the bin. My puzzle looks great as it is. I don't need that bit.
So are conspiracy theorists unusual in this way, or is that typical of people?
No, I think it's typical of the human species. Why would we look for answers if we don't want to have a complete picture? I just think that conspiracy theorists take it to the nth degree. In much the same way some of the autistic kids that I used to work with do. I had one kid who completely related his entire world to Star Trek, because Star Trek wrapped everything up in a neat package. And he described everybody that he met as a Klingon or a Romulan or something, because that, for him, encapsulated why this person was behaving in this way. And it helped him navigate the world. I don't see a difference with conspiracy theories. It neatly encapsulates a worldview, and they're happy with that worldview.
What about 9/11?
What about 9/11? Which particular conspiracy about 9/11?
So there's the official version, and then there's a whole bunch of versions that depart to varying degrees until you get right on the end where there were no planes and they're all holograms and so on. So
that would be a neat trick.
Yeah. So do you put any credence in any of the questions that are being asked about 9/11?
Questions, yes. Questions are good. Ignoring facts and clear pieces of plane, not so much. But no, nobody wants to believe that any human being is capable of that kind of destruction. Why would you want to believe that? But on the other hand, or the conspiracy theories that get me are the ones that say the government did it. Why would the American government deliberately upend its own financial stability? What purpose did that serve? To me, that makes no sense. And maybe somebody can sit me down and explain why that makes sense. But for me, that it just makes no sense. Why would they do that? And to kill off that many people and possibly send yourself into financial ruin for the chance to go to war seems like a foolish errand, even for politicians. That seems foolish.
Okay, so let's move on to our next clip. Here, a psychological researcher asks the conspiracy theorist David Icke if he agrees that conspiracy theories mainly arise to fulfill a psychological need for people who believe in them. David Icke doesn't agree, and he voices some objections to this idea. So let's hear what he has to say.
I've been looking forward to meeting you. One of the things that I wanted to get your opinion on was some research that we carried out recently, and what we expected to find and what we did find from a large-scale survey that we carried out was that the kind of people who tend to believe in conspiracies show a particular profile, or they tend to. And what that suggested to us was that maybe the tendency to believe in conspiracies is there because for some people it serves a kind of psychological purpose. It helps them to try and make sense of what in many ways can seem to be a kind of uncontrollable, unpredictable world. Do you feel that believing in conspiracies does serve some kind of psychological function for those people who tend to believe in them?
Well, you keep using the word theory, and the one word that's not been used yet is evidence. This whole opening of the mind to this conspiracy version of world events has not been as a result of psychological profiles or whatever. It's been the result of people saying they're lying to us.
Now, when it comes to some of the claims that you've made, I would say that, for some of them there is next to no evidence. I would also say, again, we all have human biases. We all tend to be selective. I knew you'd ask me that, and I'll acknowledge openly I haven't actually read the books.
So you don't know the evidence, Chris.
I do know the evidence. I've read about your writings.
When you've read even one of my books, then we could chat again, maybe.
On all of these issues, there are other points of view. For the evidence...
Don't believe what I say, then.
I don't believe what you say, obviously.
What's the problem?
Is there anything that could happen in the world that would convince you were wrong? Not just claim that George Bush or Queen or whoever is...
The man's talking crap, mate.
Okay, conspiracies take place. It's the nature of the conspiracies, and when there is kind of overwhelming evidence against a particular conspiracy, but people still cling tenaciously to it, that then moves into the realm, as far as I'm concerned, of probably trying to look at the psychology behind it.
I don't care if you've got a problem. It's your right to decide what you want to believe.
Right, and that's what I'm doing.
But it's all this profiling people and saying, well, yes, he's one of them, so he's just believing it because it's giving him a way of seeing the world. It's all that stuff that gets up my nose because it's so song sheet science, song sheet psychology. Are we finished?
It seems that belief in conspiracy runs too deep to be so easily overcome.
So that was David Icke and his response to the psychological theory of conspiracies. Let's go straight into our guests' reactions now.
Well, I think the idea that, the guy didn't read the book, he just probably came with a few lines that he was told to say, and he was just probably showing up and saying, I'm going to pick on you and try to get a reaction out of you, even though everything I'm telling you is kind of bunk, right? I mean, you go and interview a guy, if you're going to take it serious, obviously you're going to look at some of the research, obviously you're going to read a book or something. So how am I supposed to take this guy trying to debunk David Icke serious if he doesn't even take it serious, right? He makes the statement that, conspiracy theories help people to make sense of an unpredictable world. First thing, yeah, the world is unpredictable, but there are things that can be explained, and there's evidence, because when you start using evidence, that's what science is all about, being able to explain things. So you look at the evidence, you look at the facts, you bring it all together, and hopefully, you use scientific method and you try to explain something, right? And that's what a theory is, trying to explain something. And then on top of that, you got to be careful, because when you start grouping people as conspiracy theorists, and if you start saying, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist, and everyone gets grouped in the same, then you're starting to limit the debate and the dialogue, because now you hold all these different labels and these ideas of what a conspiracy theorist is, or what he looks like, or what he talks about, or whatever, right? So, I mean, right off the bat, this guy is trying to group all conspiracy theorists together, which is dangerous, and it's not even, I don't even think, that's not scientific at all, you know what I mean? That's very dangerous thinking. I think the opposite needs to happen, because, a crazy conspiracist that wears tinfoil on his hat and is scared of aliens reading their brain is completely different than what I'm all about. You know what I mean? So I don't want to be grouped with some sort of paranoid person that's going to go and try to bomb some sort of government place, because that's not what I'm about. And then he ends, I wrote this down because I thought this was a hilarious way the guy ended the video. He said, it seems the belief in conspiracy runs too deep to be overcome. And again, he's just using drama as a way to play to the audience, even though the guy in that video clip, he didn't use any science or anything like that to actually overcome some sort of false belief in a conspiracy. Just try to lump them into one big pot of crazy kook, right?
He never answered the question. Whether he was ambushed or not, he never answered the question. He just kept repeating the same thing. You're doing this, you're doing that, you're trying to change my worldview. He never actually said what would make him think about the fact that he was wrong. Well, surely he should have thought about that. If he truly thinks all these conspiracies are real, then he's also surely looked at the possibility that they're not real. Surely you would have done that. However, the other guy completely ambushed him. He hasn't read his books. You can't judge a person on reading about their books. You've got to read the book and look at the arguments that are made, and whether you then think that they're factual or not is a judgment call that you can only make if you actually read the information.
So then on the other side of the coin, do you think some people have a tendency to kind of dismiss these other, narratives on the basis of their weird tinfoil hat conspiracies?
Of course. For exactly the same reason that conspiracies are appealing, the idea that conspiracies might exist is also entirely unappealing to other people in the population. For the same reason, because they have their worldview, and these conspiracy theorists and the theories that they come up with challenge that worldview. And they don't like that. Most people have their ideas and they want to stick to those ideas. Having someone turn around and say something else is not appealing, and therefore it's very tempting to dismiss them as tinfoil hat wearing weirdos.
Finally, Morgan comments here on the claim made by David Icke quite a number of years ago now, that many of the world's leaders were in fact lizard people whose true faces you could see out of the corner of your eye,
once you had a spiritual or mental awakening. Now, this claim is not really central to David Icke's worldview, but inevitably, when you say something like that, it becomes permanently associated with you, and it has followed him around as he has researched other areas. So we're going to hear Morgan's take on that now.
I've never read David Icke, so I only know through secondhand sources, but I like it as a metaphor for the world in the sense that, I do believe that a lot of the people that occupy positions of power in our society are acting in profoundly, not even immoral, but amoral ways. The way that our economic life is organized, the way that foreign policy is conducted, it's not done according to any kind of moral or ethical standards. It's, power politics or self-aggrandizement. And that is there's something deeply kind of reptilian about that. I mean, as mammals, we're warm-blooded, our lives are based on, mutual care and compassion and nurturance. And those ethics don't really seem to be translated within most of the dominant institutions in our society. So I like it as a metaphor. As a literal rendering of the world, I'm skeptical to say the least.
Let's hear now from the neuroscientist, philosopher, and prominent atheist Sam Harris. This is a very short excerpt from a 3-hour interview with Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks. The full interview is really fascinating and quite intense. The two men get into debates on a very wide range of philosophical, spiritual, and political issues. But we're going to play just a brief excerpt today. In this part of the program, Sam and Cenk were discussing the prospects for dealing with global threats like Islamic State. And Sam Harris had some interesting things to say about the role of conspiracy theories and how they affect world leaders' ability to exercise power in positive ways. So let's hear what he says.
One of them. Now, I actually think I'm beaten down enough by reality at this point as to think that, we actually can't really go in and save the Yazidis. We have to wait for the Muslims in the neighborhood to do it. It's so inflammatory to have Christian crusaders doing this that we need the Turks and the...
I don't even think it's the Christian crusaders. I think that what people are skeptical about is you're going to come take our oil.
We just want the oil, right? We couldn't buy this, but
right.
it's much more cost effective to spend trillions of dollars.
They have a fair point there. It's not about us, the American people, getting the oil. It's about the oil contracts, and we are often driven by that because of donations to the political system.
Yeah, I think so. I don't believe most of that, but in any case, I understand the perception is there, and we have to deal with the perception. The perception is harmful, and the conspiracy theories that run through the Muslim world are harmful, and the conspiracy theories that run through our world are harmful, in that it's almost impossible for good people to use power in a way that is not causing more of a problem, because everyone distrusts power. Everyone has a story about why the people in power are always evil.
Right. Let's see what our guests thought of Sam's comments there.
Well, what I got from it was that it was like an oversimplified statement saying that people don't trust people with power. Like, you can't trust people with power, right? And I would say that that's not true. I would say that not everyone distrusts power. I think there's a lot of people that, depending on the country we speak about, because like every country is a little different, but you could see that there's a lot of people that are either relatively satisfied or very happy with what their police, their military, and their government are doing. If you go read online and to like news articles or in the comments section of the news articles and stuff, you can see that people, even when I do my research, I look down like some story and I'm like, I can't believe the government's doing this, and I look down and 70% or 75% of the comments are like, oh yeah, finally the government did something good. So obviously not everyone distrusts power. A lot of people think that the power that the government has right now is legitimate. So what I think Mr. Harris is referring to is the idea that no matter what choice you make, someone will always have a problem with what choice you made. Basically, there's never a winning scenario. And I think there's like some truth behind it, but we have to remember there's a reason why people don't trust things, right? Why people don't trust like the idea of giving to charity or humanitarian aid, right? Because sometimes like people give to the Red Cross, and the Red Cross keeps all the money. You know what I mean? Like, so there's always questions about what's the true nature or what's the true intent of someone of a country that's trying to aid another country or trying to help another country. Like the whole idea of going over to the Middle East and bombing democracy into them.
Well, I find it absolutely astonishing that, he's, on the one hand, he seems to be brushing aside conspiracy theories, but then on the other hand, the almost undoubtedly true assertion that the United States entered into the conflict in Iraq for the sake of oil and power. It wasn't, of course, simply about the oil. It was also about defense contractors and the whole array of special interests that rule the political system in that country. But the idea that isn't true, that the United States would have entered Iraq if it hadn't had any oil, if the chief product in Iraq had been, I don't know, bananas. I mean, are we really expected to believe that? It's incredible to me. So there you have a person with a stunning lack of, or a stunning amount of credulity at what dominant political figures are claiming. Although I'm not even sure that they are claiming that they didn't enter into Iraq because of the oil. I think most of them, if they were pressed on the issue, would at least admit that had it not been for the oil, they wouldn't have been in Iraq. They might make claims about other underlying causes or reasons for the invasion, but certainly oil was one of the reasons. So, he's lost any credibility that he had in my eyes with that statement.
So, do you think it's true that if people, as Sam Harris says, if people distrust power, then it prevents those in power from acting wisely to make the world a better place?
No, I think people, to the extent that people do doubt power and are suspicious of power, they're rightfully suspicious and doubtful. Unfortunately, I don't think they're suspicious enough, and I don't think there's enough of a check there on the exercise of power. And that's certainly, to my mind, that's a much greater threat than the idea that, people's suspicions of the powerful are somehow going to prevent the powerful people in society from acting in our best interests, which I would never trust them to do. So I would like people, if that's his definition of a conspiracy theory or a conspiratorial mind, I think people should probably cultivate more of that.
He mentioned he mentioned that the conspiracy theories in the Muslim world are damaging. I don't know much about conspiracies in the Muslim world as a whole, but certainly, I mean, our dear leader here in Turkey puts forward some crazy ideas at times. Do you think some of those have the potential to be damaging?
Certainly, but I don't think that when he talks about conspiracies in the Muslim world, I don't think he's necessarily talking about the kind of conspiracies that the people in power might be mouthing. I think he's thinking more at the societal level, the kind of political attitudes and beliefs that you find among typical Muslims. But and certainly they can be harmful and damaging if they're patently false, and if they're motivating people to act in violent or destructive ways. Then yeah, they could be harmful. But it's sort of ironic for an American to be wagging his finger at people in other parts of the world for their own conspiratorial imaginations, when, to my mind, from what I know, and I have a deep interest in American culture, it has been historically and remains a society profoundly obsessed with conspiracies. The entire Cold War period was one big exercise in mass delusion. The belief in this octopus-like Soviet creature with arms, tentacles, extending to every part of the world, manipulating every protest or every kind of challenge to American power, was completely at odds with the reality. And in that sense, that particular conspiracy was incredibly destructive and led to catastrophic damage and bloodshed, whether it's in Southeast Asia and Indochina or throughout Latin America. These proxy wars or invasions that were carried out in the name of preventing the spread of communism. So, what else can I say? The guy has no credibility in my eyes.
Do I agree that it's harmful? The political conspiracies, yeah, they're mostly harmful. They serve no purpose except to inflame set beliefs on either side, or that are already there, maybe to a lesser extent, but as the conspiracy grows, so does the resentment on both sides, and you end up with not having any kind of common ground that you can work from. So even if the leaders on both sides are perfectly reasonable people and are trying to come to a conclusion, they're not going to be supported by their people, whichever side they're on, because they're not going to believe anything that's being said. You're just a part of the conspiracy. That's the danger of conspiracies, is that if you don't believe them, then you're a part of it. And that's I'm washing my hands of you, I don't need to speak to you because you're a part of the conspiracy.
For the tape, Nicola just made the Turkish "I'm washing my hands" gesture.
Yeah.
Has that played out with ISIS, do you think? I mean, we seem to be doing nothing or next to nothing about ISIS.
Because we're terrified.
Mm-hmm.
They made such a bungle of relations. I mean, we caused most of the issue. In all fairness, the Western world caused most of the problems when they went in after the First World War and then after the Second World War and just went, I'll have that, and I'll have that, and you can have that because you're my friend. And completely split up the politics that was already happening at the time, which then created artificial borders and grouped people together that weren't happy being grouped together. And now they're like, well, why don't you get along? We tried so hard to make you get along. Why don't you get along? And then we completely bungled the Middle East twice. 2 wars. Completely bungled it twice. Political relations aren't very good in the intervening times. And now you've got Western powers that are blaming the powers in the Middle East for not doing something about a problem that we've created. And we're going in going, well, we'll, bomb the hell out of them and that'll make everybody happy. And it just won't. And I'm not sure, I'm not qualified in any way to come up with a solution, but I don't think that the way that they're doing it at the moment is going to be effective in any way. And certainly the conspiracies or theories or ideas or whatever you want to call them certainly feed into the propaganda on both sides.
Lastly, we're going to hear from a guy called Michael Waldman. Michael is the executive director of the Brennan Center, which is a legal rights advocacy group in the US. He doesn't talk directly about conspiracies, but he does talk about the loss of faith in broken institutions. And whereas Sam Harris tends to think that this lack of faith can be a problem, Michael Waldman tends to think of it as an opportunity and perhaps a spur to positive change. So let's hear what he has to say.
In very significant ways, our democracy is broken. It needs repair. And a lot of the progress that's been made in recent decades, we've really fallen back. You have this remarkable situation right now in 2008. On the one hand, there's a huge upsurge in citizen engagement and interest, more people voting, more people giving campaign contributions and small dollars through the internet. All these signs that the public is deeply excited and engaged about politics. On the other hand, our government's broken, our democracy badly needs repair. We have tens of millions of people who are not registered to vote because of flaws in our voter registration system. You've got campaign spending going up 5-fold in the past quarter century. the number of lobbyists tripling in Washington, D.C. in the past decade. These are all things that have been around for a long time, but they've gotten worse and they've compounded. And so the sense that Washington and national politics is stuck, that special interests are keeping action from taking place on key issues, that the voice of ordinary citizens is frozen out, and that politicians are caught up in this crazy system of chasing after money and spending much of their time fundraising, that's all real. And it's something people are waking up to the need to change. And when you have that sense of public engagement colliding with broken institutions throughout our history, that's when you get real change.
It's not that democracy is broken, it's that democracy was radically redefined. Classical democracy in ancient Greece had a specific meaning, which had to do with the property land-holding men exercising political power, in some cases over their slaves and others. But in the American case, what you got was there's a famous political scientist named Robert Dahl who came up with the word polyarchy, which basically just means rotating leadership. And so what you have in America is not democracy. You have an elite, a system of rotating elites who overwhelmingly are backed up by money in the American case. I mean, it's impossible to run an American election without huge sums of money. I mean, you either have to be a billionaire or you have to have your Rolodex, packed up with them to finance a campaign. So, and the idea that political elites are not answerable to the money interests that support them in their bid for political power is just beyond belief. I mean, that anyone could take that claim seriously, but that's a very popular claim, at least in respectable circles. The idea that these people are somehow incorruptible. They're human beings. They're flesh and blood mortals. If somebody gives them money and employs their family members or their children and offers them positions out of office when they leave political power, of course they're going to do the bidding of their paymasters. So I think it's a very healthy development. I think part of it has to do with the telecommunications revolution, the internet, which has opened up a lot of the floodgates as far as alternative media sources and allowing people to become more aware of some of these problems, which have always been there.
I would question his numbers on votes and how many people are actually getting involved, because most of the things that I've seen show that it's all decreasing. People are turned off by the fact that they know that politicians are spending most of their time campaigning to get back into office, or they're trying to raise money. People know that. And that's turning a lot of people away from politics. Again, how do you fix a system? I mean, all these things have a place. I mean, the lobbyists have a place in that that they are trying to get forward kind of the smaller things, if you like. That's the role. I mean, a lot of them are campaigning for big corporations, but the original idea of a lobbyist was, well, this is happening in my town and nobody's paying attention to it, and it needs to be resolved at my local government or at the federal level. That needs to happen. And people need to be aware of it, and if they're more aware of it, then it can be fixed. That's the original idea. So they have a purpose. The problem is that they've been hijacked by people who can pay lots of money for services rendered, which is pushing out the smaller interests again, and reducing the effectiveness of the lobbyist for actual normal people.
I think he's right. I mean, if people start, wanting to fix the government and wanting to question things, then I think that definitely we have the power to, be a force of change, a force of positive change in the world. I mean, democracy is broken, and for many reasons. But one of the main reasons I would say is because the people are broken. You know what I mean? Because democracy is supposed to be a government of the people. But I mean, if people are so apathetic and they don't care and whatever, then the people that run the government can do whatever they want without being held accountable to anything, right? So there doesn't need to be a giant conspiracy to maintain a corrupt system. If a large percentage of the population choose to be completely ignorant to the corruption, then they just have to have a few select groups keep everything on track, right? Just make sure all the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed, and then they can continue their oppressive and corrupt system. I mean, to get into each institution to start breaking it down would take forever. But if people start just, pick one topic that they find interesting, one institution in democracy that they find interesting, and you do some research on it and try to learn about the history of it and where it's developed, you'll easily see the influence of corruption and the influence of immorality or just poor development. It's not going the way it should be going. We're not hitting our potential as a society, and it's because we're being held back. We're holding ourselves back, first of all. We're not deciding to get involved and come together and fight for anything that's worthwhile. But on top of that, we've got this whole system of control that's holding us back. And when I say system of control, we're talking about like all these different organizations and these psychological organizations or universities and health organizations. Like there's different the people. If you look at the people that have controlled politics for so long, like the banks and all those, and where do they put their money? And then these institutions that are controlled by the same people, like there's an agenda, right? So those people that run this agenda are holding the population back from knowledge about their own power and then what's actually happening in the world and like the power of a conspiracy, really. Like that's really what this is all about, like whole hiding the power of a conspiracy. What can be done if you work together in a conspiracy, especially in a criminal conspiracy? What can actually be accomplished if no one else knows you're doing it? If you're working in secret, and that's really what's being held back, is the idea that they don't want us to know about what they've been doing behind closed doors for so long and where they're heading with everything. Because there's a lot of knowledge back there behind those doors that if we knew about, we would change our mentality. Like as a society, we would evolve, especially consciously, and then just hopefully socially we would, become more accepting and just become different type of people. Because right now they got us all divided and stuff because we all, everyone thinks we're all different from each other and whatever. There's all this different knowledge that would change everyone's line of thinking, and that's really what's being hidden.
Just a quick advert break. Our email is scottsentinel9@gmail.com. Check out our past episodes. We've got lots of interesting guests, and you can find us on YouTube on 2 channels. We talk about conspiracies, mysteries, injustices, corruption, religion, war, peace. You can leave your own message and we can base our show around what you think. That's what we intend to do. You can find our website on Google. Just type in Truth Sentinel Scott and WIX and it will come up. You can find latest episodes there. You can help us find the truth hidden deep within mainstream media. Find our YouTube channels. We've got all the episodes on there. Truth Sentinel and Truth Sentinel 1. Subscribe to both so you get notified of everything. Click on the About section. You'll find all the links. Have you got something you'd like to advertise? If it's truth related, honest and ethical, get in contact. You can help us. We can help you. We sell our own t-shirts with "The Greatest Enemy of Truth is Blind Belief in Authority" on the back. Just $20 plus postage and packing. Let us know your size. Just send us an email. We can sort it out. We've also teamed up with trutht-shirts.com and they make political t-shirts. Let people know where you stand, basically. Use the code TRUTH1. You get a 10% discount and we get a donation. They make all kinds of political t-shirts and they can customize them for you as well. If you've got any ideas for publicity stunts, get in contact. We need to escalate this channel, make it much bigger. We need your help. Please support us. Thank you.
So those are the reactions that our various guests had to the clips we watched together. Scott, what did you make of all of that?
Well, there's a lot to comment on, really. And we're a bit strapped for time, but I thought, first of all, I wanted to say I thought the guests you had on were were great, and they were all kind of they all had very, very rational responses to the clips you showed them and to the topic, and slightly different views, which I think was good. It kind of shows that just because you don't necessarily agree with everything one person says doesn't mean that they can't, that it's not a valid comment that they're talking about. Their response is just as valid as anyone else's. But I identified more with some people's answers, but I thought they were really good comments from your guests anyway.
Yeah, I thought so too. I really enjoyed the chats. I hope we can do more of them. It was very interesting. I think perhaps we focused a little bit too much on political conspiracies. We didn't get into, the very esoteric sort of Illuminati, alien abduction side of things. We tended to focus more on power groups within the political system and so on. But that's obviously something that concerns all of us, I would say.
Yeah, and I mean, I could go through dissecting every little bit, but I did make a few notes, so I'll just comment on some of the things, and we'll see where it goes. But one of your clips was a guy called James from Popular Mechanics who said, "Conspiracy theorists ignore the evidence."
Yeah.
And I just wanted to say that that's not the way I see it. I don't think that's the case. I mean, you could also argue the other way around, that people who dismiss every person who questions as a conspiracy theorist, those people who dismiss conspiracy theories are ignoring all the evidence as well. So you can look at it from 2 points of view, because a lot of conspiracy theories are based on alternative evidence, or a different way of thinking, and it's just as valid evidence. So you could say people on both sides are ignoring the evidence. And he said something about he was talking about the Pentagon plane and saying he talked to people who said they'd held parts of the plane in their hands, but that's not exactly the same as holding parts of a plane in your hands. He's talking to people who said they held parts of the plane in their hands. So you can't just take everything as at face value. It's hearsay, basically. It's second-hand information. You can't just automatically say, well, somebody said they held a part of the plane in their hands, therefore it's true. I mean, what about all the evidence that all the, in the case of the Pentagon plane, all the video recordings of the plane, they don't exist. They were all confiscated. I mean, that's evidence as well. And he mentioned actually a photograph, and it wasn't a photograph of the plane hitting the building. It was a video, and it's very, very brief and quick, and it doesn't actually show a plane going into the Pentagon. It shows what some people think is actually a missile. So his saying that the evidence has been ignored, I think, was just incorrect.
Yeah, I mean that guy, as you saw in the segment, he is the editor of Popular Mechanics, and they did have a fairly public spat with the 9/11 Truth movement, or portions of it, and I think both sides came away from that fairly bitter. I don't know all the details of the argument that they had, but they had a fairly public falling out, and so he has, I think, walked away with a fairly dim view of conspiracy theories and the people who believe them. And I suspect some of his comments are coming from that angle. I think when Popular Mechanics published its findings, the reactions in the 9/11 Truth movement were none too positive. So he took a lot of criticism, and perhaps he's reacting to that a little bit.
And I think a lot of this boils down to the fact of how much do you trust people? Do you trust authority? I think that's what a lot of it boils down to, because he also said they tested the DNA, of the passengers on the plane. It was found inside the Pentagon building. Well, that means you have to trust that they. I presume he was talking about the CIA and people like that. You'd have to trust that they're telling the truth. I mean, are there such things as cover-ups, for example? I mean, people who don't believe in conspiracy theories would probably say, no, these people don't cover up stuff. That you should trust what they say. Well, whereas those people who are more conspiratorial might say, well, cover-ups happen all the time. So it does depend on your worldview as well, I guess.
It certainly does. Yeah, to a very large extent. I wanted to say here that we are going to look. I hope we're going to look during this season at the whole issue of forensic evidence, including DNA evidence, because there is a perception at the moment that DNA evidence is watertight. And in fact, DNA evidence has been used to overrule a lot of previous findings about crimes, about historical events. But the cracks have begun to appear in terms of DNA evidence being absolute and incontrovertible. And I think that's quite an important theme, certainly when we talk about criminal cases, and also in cases like this as well. So yeah, on another episode, I think we should go into that in more detail.
Definitely, yeah. I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. Also, he mentioned top scientists and experts, which we talked about before, and I think, well, again, I'd say, well, there's also top scientists and experts who've actually sort of come on the side of the 9/11 truthers, or there's people, buildings experts, demolition experts, who've all signed documents saying they have questions as well. So, it was a very one-sided view from him. I'm not sure if it was him or someone else who said also on one of your clips that the conspiracy theories are the least skeptical people you will ever meet, and I just don't think that's true.
That was James May.
Yeah,
that was the Popular Mechanics guy. Yeah, he said that. Yeah. No, you're right. He does. As I said, it was quite an acrimonious falling out, and I think that now the two sides are quite negative towards each other. So his views are coming from that perspective to an extent.
But I think his views do reflect some of the views of people who don't believe in conspiracy theories.
They believe everything which confirms what they already think is true, is I think what he was saying. And I don't agree with him, but I do think it's an important I do think it's an important maxim. When somebody like that makes that accusation, and he isn't a media talking head. He is a fairly serious technical person. When someone like that makes an accusation that people are too willing to accept things without the evidence, I think it reminds us that if we're going to counter that, we do need to be quite thorough in examining the evidence, and then we can come back at a person like that and say, well, actually, we did look at the evidence, we did discard things that didn't make sense, even though they might have appealed to us at first, and what we're left with is this, and we think we have an alternative version to the one that you've proposed, which stands up to scientific scrutiny.
Yeah, I think it's two different ways of thinking again. There's people who are more inclined to automatically go with the official story, and there's people who are automatically inclined to reject the official story. So, there's two different types of people, and he obviously seems the type of person who would automatically go with the official story straight away. But I would bring up the example of things like MH370 and some people's reaction to the official story, so dismissing anyone who doesn't agree with it as a conspiracy theorist, and again referring to the Fox News analysis of it, saying the top conspiracy theories were that it had been shot down as if that would never happen, it was hijacked as if that would never happen, when of course historically we know that has happened. I refer again to the Iranian Flight 655 in 1988. And President George Bush actually said about that incident at the UN, he said, "I will never apologize for the United States. I don't care what the facts are." So they're refusing to apologize for the deaths of 274 innocent people, and yet they paid $60 million to the families of the dead without admitting responsibility. So it's clear historically that there are cover-ups and planes are shot down, and so that's just one example of how historically you can show these cover-ups and conspiracies do exist.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there are some that are pretty much incontrovertible. But something that Walter said actually, I think is pertinent here. He was drawing a distinction between, questioning the power structures that are out there versus being afraid that, satellites are going to read your brain. and by the way, I'm not completely discounting the possibility that satellites are reading our brains because I don't discount anything. But his point was, I think sometimes, as soon as you start to propose an alternate reading of events, then you get lumped in with much more outlandish things than what you're actually saying. And in the case of MH370, there were the alien abduction theories and so on. And again, I don't discount them, but I would say they're quite unlikely in comparison to some of the things that you and I have discussed and you've discussed with Sarah Bajak. There are many possibilities with MH370 that depart from the official story, but don't involve such outlandish things. Things that we know have happened before, things that we know have a history and a logical train which follows them.
Yeah, and I thought Walter also made another good comment about the media and the government not doing their job and not answering questions.
Absolutely.
And so is it any wonder that people are siding on the idea that the conspiracy theories are more likely to be true because nobody, the media aren't answering the questions or even asking the questions, and the government certainly aren't answering the questions. So what do they expect in a way,
Yeah, exactly. And unfortunately, I think there is less and less direct, shall we say, cross-examination of political leaders. In America, that's been the case for a long time. I mean, there's no American equivalent of question time, and that's been the case for a very long time. But in countries like the UK and Australia, there are still things like question time, but the media is giving, I think, more and more of a free ride to political leaders who make contentious and sometimes outrageous claims, and so we have to, in a sense, fill the space that the mainstream media is not filling, because that is part of its job, to say to the people who are in rabbit ears leading our countries, when they make claims which don't stack up, it's the media's job to say, all right, so explain yourself. And in disturbingly many cases, that isn't happening.
Yeah, I also thought that Nicola and Morgan both had rational responses and different views, and Nicola seemed slightly more trusting of the powers that be than I am, perhaps, but she did accept that questions are good and nobody wants to believe that these people in power are capable of being as evil as some people think they are. I actually think they are quite evil, and I'm always I actually don't think they would care. They genuinely care about people at all.
Well, this is a point that Sam Harris makes, and I think it's a very good point. He says part of the problem with geopolitical policies and garnering support for geopolitical policies is that many people assume that everybody else in the world thinks like them. So an action that they would consider unconscionable would be unconscionable to anyone else as well. That's what he says. But he goes on to say we can't think like that. There are people in the world, for example, who believe that dying in the service of some obscure tenet of religious doctrine is better than living in a world where not everybody accepts that obscure tenet of religious doctrine. Those people are on a completely different plane to us. So we can't go into the world assuming that because we think something, we would never do X or Y or Z, that nobody else would either. And I think that applies in many cases to the political elites that Morgan especially was talking about, that they are coming at things from a very different point of view, and sometimes it's quite difficult to put yourself in their shoes because some of the things that they do and say seem completely unfamiliar to us, you know, and we could never imagine
ourselves viewing the world from that same perspective.
Yeah, but also, if you look at their actions, it clearly demonstrates their lies in a way. Their lies are, for me, they're clearly exposed. I mean, if they sort of saying they're going to war because Saddam Hussein is attacking his own people as an evil man, instead of telling the truth, it's quite clear that they don't care about Saddam Hussein and what he's doing to his own people. Because if they did, then they would go into other countries like Rwanda and stop all the bloodshed there, you know. So it's quite easy to point out stuff like that, you know. It's quite easy to see that they're lying about actions where they're saying they're doing it out of care for people. It's very easy to expose, you know.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that I don't think there's a very good case for we go in and stop the most evil people in the world when we have to because they're being more evil than anyone else. That's clearly not true. But I also think on the other side of that equation, if you've got somebody who has a lot of oil and is being evil, then that's more appealing than somebody who's just being evil. So I think you could argue it's 50-50. Like half of it is, okay, this guy's just being a real fuck now, and also he's in one of the parts of the world that we're particularly interested in because of resources. You could argue that. I'm not sure that that's really true, but I think it's arguable.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, another thing I wanted to mention was your David Icke video. I would probably side on the side of David Icke there. I think the guy that came to meet him on the beach was just. I can understand David Icke's kind of impatience with this guy, because he could clearly see what this guy had an agenda. Wasn't bothered in reading his book and looking at any of the evidence, and just had, you know, made his flippant comment, which Walter picked up on, basically saying that, you know, once you believe in conspiracy theories, there's really no way of getting over that, basically.
Yeah, that's why I included the coda to that clip, because it was hilarious. I when I saw it, I thought, you're kidding me. You can't possibly be finishing your article with this stupid comment about conspiracy theories are hard to shake. You know, it was so silly. Yeah, that was a snow job, totally. I mean, that guy went in there specifically to try to provoke, in my view anyway, to try to provoke David Icke to say something crazy so he could be the crazy conspiracy theorist. And, you know, of course, David Icke doesn't have the longest fuse in the world, and he took the bait, you know. But I think in the same situation, I would also have been annoyed with that guy, because, you know, sure, by all means, come and ask me any question you want, but don't start throwing accusations around when you don't actually know what it is that I'm claiming about the world, you know. So, yeah, it was a dreadful interview.
Yeah, and I wanted to also very quickly just to talk about Alex Jones as well.
Oh God.
Because we might have different views on him, but I just wanted to basically say I think he's often dismissed as a crackpot conspiracy theorist, since we're talking about conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
And you know, I think you mentioned a clip of, or you showed a clip of Alex Jones, doing on a rant or something, and I think it's very easy to show those kind of clips, and, you know, Alex Jones is a kind of has a flawed character, and it's very easy to attack him. But I do think, you know, he does a 3-hour show every day, and he's quite passionate, and I think it's quite difficult to fake passion. I mean, a lot of world political leaders have advisors and spend hours and hours trying to be as human as possible. Whereas Alex Jones, you know, he's actually sometimes flies into rages and rants, and I think it's hard to fake that. I think sometimes maybe he does fake it a little or exaggerate, but I think generally I'm someone who thinks that he's fairly genuine about what he believes in, but has just got maybe a sometimes dubious way of showing it. But at the end of the day, his heart's in the right place, and he's, you know, his
got a lot of people listening to him, so he's affecting a lot of people. So I would tend to say, all I wanted to say was, I tend to think that he's not a government shill, or what, what some people say. I think he's reasonably genuine.
Okay, well, I think he's a nut, but and I think that when we saw that little excerpt, when he's talking about licking the boots of the tyrants and so on, and then it cut to a picture of him just sitting calmly, looking into the camera. It reminded me a lot of I don't know if you remember the opening credits of the Michael Moore film Fahrenheit 9/11, when you had George Bush making a speech about freedom, and then over the credits of the film we saw George Bush doing what he did after the cameras stopped rolling, which was completely different to what he did when the cameras were on. And I felt the same when I watched the Alex Jones clip. It seemed like he just kind of switched on, switched off. And yeah, I mean, like I said, I think he's a nut. However, I will say this: he has brought a lot of people into the truth movement, and I don't think we can take that away from him. I think he's asked a lot of questions, and he's asked them in a way which catch people's attention. So in that respect, good on him.
But isn't that what some of this is all about? I mean, you say he's a nut, but that's often put, or that's often said about Alex Jones. But actually, if you look at the things he's talking about and the research that he does, or his team does, it's not really nutty. It's based on fairly solid research. I mean, occasionally they get stuff wrong, like every news agency, but I would say he's not a nut. He's just someone who perhaps presents things sometimes in a way that some people would think is a bit nutty.
Well, he claims that FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency in the US, are planning to put 90% of the US population into camps, right? Internment camps like the Japanese internment camps during World War II. And his evidence for this is that somebody spotted a lot of coffins somewhere in some kind of goods yard or storage facility. So they spotted a few thousand coffins.
Yeah, but just to interrupt, his evidence isn't that somebody said that. His evidence is videos showing that.
Yeah.
So.
Somebody saw it. Yeah. So there were.
He's actually got videos of it. So whilst some people might not think that's true, he's at least showing the videos of the coffins. He's showing the FEMA camps. So
he's not showing the FEMA camps. He's showing a lot of coffins. so I mean, yes, okay. It's very interesting when you see it raises obvious questions when you see a bunch of coffins built for people that haven't died, and they're obviously mass produced. It's not like when you look at a funeral parlor and they go and they show you their 4 or 5 models. It was thousands of coffins. So that raises some fairly serious questions. But to go from there to FEMA is planning to intern almost the entire population, I think is a pretty big leap of faith. And he makes a lot of those leaps, unfortunately.
Well, if that's the case, yeah, I mean, the future will tell us whether he's right or wrong about that.
It will.
But he's been right about some other stuff, so you could dismiss that, and you may be right to dismiss it. But he was right about Bohemian Grove, that they were doing kind of sacrificial rituals there, and then he went in and he took a video and proved it. So you've got to give the guy some credit.
I do. I give him
he's proved some of the stuff that other people laughed at us.
Yeah, no, I think sometimes sometimes he does make, well, not that rarely he makes some fairly legitimate claims. So I don't want to take too much away from the guy, and as I said, he's brought a lot of people into the truth movement. But at the same time, I will say one of the things I enjoy about doing this show is that we tend to, I hope, we tend to delve into some similar areas to what you get on the InfoWars channel, Alex Jones's channel, but we delve into them in a more measured way. So I hope that, I hope that comes across, because I mean, I watch him and I just think like, oh, would you please calm down?
Yeah. The other thing, we don't want to talk too much about Alex Jones, but one thing I did want to say is he's got other presenters on there who are a bit more serious and a bit more kind of mainstream in their presentation, in their aspect of presentation, and it's quite boring to watch when those guys come on. So I think what it does show is people do like a bit of that theatrical stuff as well, or it's actually quite funny or interesting to watch sometimes.
No, I think that's true. Yeah, I think theatrical is a good word to describe him, and I think that's part of the draw. And it's probably all to the good. I mean, in the long term, he's capturing lots and lots of views that wouldn't happen otherwise. So great. Before
we wrap up, and of course you're entitled to say a few things as well, but I just wanted to quickly mention just a couple of conspiracy theories really quickly,
Sure.
not in detail at all, just to sort of say why I think conspiracy theories do have questions surrounding them that are legitimate questions. And I just wanted to quickly mention Princess Di, killed in a tunnel. The most photographed woman in the world, and she gets she has a car crash inside a tunnel. All the cameras are switched off that day on the route. There's a suspicious Citroen car. There's an inquest into her death, which is obviously biased and run by the establishment. It took an inordinate amount of time to get her to hospital, over an hour and a half, I believe. They said her chauffeur was drunk, and I just find that incredibly unlikely. He's got one of the top chauffeur jobs in the world. He's not likely to be a drunk. And actually there's video showing him of looking completely sober, and they said he was, ridiculously drunk. And I mean, you can see from the video he's not ridiculously drunk. So those are the kind of conspiracies, or the kind of points in a story which I think, there's questions, and they're quite legitimate questions which are ignored, and which is why you get conspiracy theories, because the questions have just been ignored. And there's a very good documentary which I put up on Facebook about the assassination of Princess Diana, which I urge people to have a look at, which is banned in the UK because they know that it's been presented, all the information has been presented very clearly. I also wanted to quickly mention how maybe also people do cling on to maybe conspiracy theories, and they could be wrong, and that's another thing we have to be careful about. Like one of our guests, Douglas Dietrich, mentioned about Roswell, and that he said that it wasn't true, this was just faked, basically. And whilst I don't know if that's the case or not, it did make me think, well, people who believe in Roswell and cling on to that story, if they were to find out later that it wasn't true, they'd find it really difficult to give up, because it's one of the cornerstones of UFO beliefs. So that's another thing I think we have to be careful about. It's not clinging on to a conspiracy theory and almost falling in love with it and never letting go of it if we found out later that it wasn't true.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I would say if Roswell is untrue, that doesn't collapse the whole of UFO lore, if we can call it that. But you're right. Some people become so actually falling in love with a theory is a very nice phrase. Some people do have a tendency to do that. But I don't believe. I did listen to the Douglas Dietrich episodes, and I don't believe that he successfully disproved that. But anyway, look, I wanted to mention two more things briefly. The first of them is about something which
this segment, and I hope you'll do some more in the future.
Can you still hear me?
You cut out. I think you cut out at some point there.
Okay, all right. So let me go over that again. I'll say it again. I agree with you, and I think falling in love with a theory is a really nice way to describe that, because I think sometimes we do. I think everybody does. Whether it be mainstream view of the world or a conspiracy view of the world. But if suddenly we found out tomorrow that the whole Roswell incident never happened, I don't think that would completely invalidate the views of people who believe that that there has been extensive contact between aliens and humans. It's just one incident. So if you have to let go of it, you let go of it. You have to. I mean, there's no other possibility if the evidence overwhelms you. But I wanted to mention two things just before we wrap up. The first thing is something that Morgan and Walter both mentioned, which is that conspiracies have been around for a long time. I mean, in that documentary, they strongly imply that this is a result of the internet, and traditional media like TV will always take a pot shot at the internet whenever there's one to take. So they talked about the internet has led to the proliferation of conspiracy theories and blah blah blah. But that ignores a basic truth, which is that conspiracy theories have always been with us. And I want to just give you one example from history. This is a very famous historical episode, and it happened in England in 1605, just after King James I had come to power. James succeeded Elizabeth I, and this was not a normal succession, it was a change of dynasties, because James's mother was Mary Queen of Scots, and Elizabeth had Mary executed. Now, at the time, the big question was what religion England was going to be. And Elizabeth was one of Henry VIII's daughters. Of course, he'd founded the Church of England, so she was very much a Protestant queen. But Mary was a Catholic, and so was James. Now, under Elizabeth, Catholics had been kind of relegated to minority status. But when James came to the throne, they expected that he'd use his position to improve things for them. But just like a lot of politicians today, we could reference Obama and many others. Once he got his hands on some power, all those promises just went out the window, and he decided to stick with the status quo. So Catholics were still on the outer. In fact, it got worse for Catholics after James became king, and in the first few years of his rule, they suffered a lot of persecution, and that, of course, pissed off a whole bunch of people. So the upshot was there was a group of conspirators who hatched what was essentially a terrorist plot to blow up the Houses of Parliament in England by planting barrels of gunpowder underneath the Parliament and then setting them off. And the hope was that it would kill off James and also the government. So there were about a dozen of them, and the head organiser was a guy called Robert Catesby, but they also had an explosives expert in their group, and his name was Guy Fawkes, who of course is much more famous than Catesby, because in England effigies of Guy Fawkes were burned for centuries, and the original purpose of that was to scare the shit out of Catholics who might be thinking of organising resistance against the Protestant monarchy. So anyway, the official story of the gunpowder plot goes like this. The plotters nearly got away with it, but as it happened, one member of the group had a brother-in-law in the Parliament called Lord Monteagle. So he wrote a letter to Lord Monteagle, and he said, look, stay away from Parliament on November 5th. Something bad is going to happen. November 5th was the scheduled date of the parliamentary session. So then Lord Monteagle sent word to the authorities. They searched the Parliament building on the morning of November 5th, and they found 36 bags of gunpowder in the cellars under Parliament. So they foiled the plot, just in time at the last possible moment. And then Guy Fawkes was executed, and so was Catesby, who masterminded the whole thing, and all the members of their group, except for one guy who was thrown into the Tower of London. But the thing is, that's the official version. Almost immediately after that all happened, a conspiracy theory started to circulate about this plot. And the theory was that either the government had known about the gunpowder plot much earlier, but they'd let it go right up until the last moment, or that someone within the government had orchestrated the whole thing. And in both cases, the alleged motivation was to turn public opinion against the Catholics so that they could justify the persecution and even, intensify it. And a lot of suspicion about this has fallen onto the Earl of Salisbury, Robert Cecil. He was a senior advisor to King James, and he was very hawkish. He hated the Catholics, and he was always saying they were dangerous, we have to do something about them, and so on. So the conspiracy theory is he might have been the one who engineered the plot, or he might have intervened so that it wasn't stopped until the public became aware of it. So, in all of that, right there, you can definitely take some of the language of modern day conspiracy theory and use it to describe this situation. Words like patsy and inside job definitely apply. And with the Earl of Salisbury, we can talk about, senior government officials pulling the strings and things like this. And actually, history buffs have noticed this, and they've even made, joke posters. There's a poster you can see on the internet with the words 5/11 was an inside job at the top, because as I said, the big explosion was planned for November 5th, and if you use the British convention for writing dates, you'd write November 5th as 5/11. So 5/11 was an inside job, and then they advertise addresses of like fictitious websites like 511truth.org and things like this. So yeah, a lot of parallels have been drawn to modern conspiracies, and especially to September 11th. But what's really interesting, I think, is that as time has gone on, historians have started to debate this a lot more fiercely, because some of them have begun to think there's some real evidence to back up the conspiracy theory. And both sides of this make really interesting reading, I think. Like on the pro-conspiracy side, you hear a lot about this one co-conspirator who wasn't executed, the guy who they threw into the Tower of London. It turns out he was the guy who wrote the warning letter to Lord Monteagle, and his name was Francis Tresham. They put him in the Tower of London, but he wasn't there for very long, because in December of 1605 he drank poison in his cell and he died. So then you have to ask, how does a man imprisoned in one of the most secure facilities in the world at that time get hold of a lethal dose of poison? Did he have it on him when he went in? Did someone bring it to him? This has never been answered, and we're talking 400 years later. So it seems possible that somebody wanted Francis Tresham dead because they were worried he might become a whistleblower. And again, this is, a modern term, but it very much applies to the situation. Also, Lord Monteagle received the letter from Tresham 9 days before Parliament's scheduled sitting. So again, you have to ask you, why was the rescue effort delayed until the last minute? It seems like there would have been plenty of time to do something earlier, but it was delayed, and they foiled the plot, moments before the Parliament was due to blow up. So again, it all seems a bit suspicious, I should say. And there are a ton of other debates around the gunpowder plot, but I think whichever version of the story is true, the important thing for us here is that conspiracies and conspiracy theories have always been with us, because there have always been abuses of power, and people have always known that. So of course that leads us to question and to suggest alternative explanations for different events. And I think you could argue that this isn't a kind of an outgrowth of the internet. It's an inherent part of living in any society with a power structure at the top of it.
Indeed. Anyway, we're going to have to wrap this up now. So thanks again for doing that segment.
You're welcome, Scott. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it's going to theme in well with some of the things that we cover in future weeks.
I think it will create some reactions anyway, and hopefully people will leave a few voicemails anyway. But thanks again, and catch you later.
All right. Good night, Scott.
Good night.
A bit of a longer episode today, so we're going to have a bit of a break now, so you can go and make a cup of tea or do whatever you've got to do. And I've got some music for you to listen to by John W., who's one of our listeners. Listen to the lyrics. Sometimes when we talk about some of these topics, it can be a little bit negative, so here's some positive messages of hope.
system, hope for the people that be living dark, but it's deep within us. It's the reason we don't give up, so we keep on fighting for the life that we know we should be living. I ain't never gonna stop, I ain't quitting, nah. I'm a might rider with the truth in my hand like a lightsaber. Take to the stage, my words, my warrior. I'm never gonna stop, I'm 100 mile an hour. Life is my true source of power. We control and devour every situation that I'm facing, bringing real energy. I'm lacing, people keep telling me you got the energy. Don't ever stop cause you're laying down legacy. I say my words ain't legacy, it's just the way that it should be. Still a kick, pushing with a positive vibe, cause the fire inside burns bright. I'm alive when I ride on the might in my heart, in my hand, I'm a man. That means more than it can.
Hope is a beautiful thing, gives you life and strength from within, gives you power through the hard times, light in the dark times, helps your eyes find the signs. So just live and let that feeling go. Your dreams are at the end of the road. You may still have to work hard, but having hope in your heart is always the best.
I bring hope to the women and there's good men here. Hope to the man that we need no fear. Hope to the girl that don't wanna get burned. Hope to the boy that don't wanna get hurt. Hope to the people that don't wanna get robbed. Hope to the ones that have no job. Hope to the ones that come from nothing. Believe you can turn your life to something. They told me that I'd never be nothing, but I kept pushing, son, you had something. And that thing was a damn good soul. So I grabbed all my thoughts and I ran for my goals. Hope in my heart and belief in myself that I'll do the right thing. If I found that wealth, put money to the kids with no one else. Show them life's rich, believe in yourself.
Hope is a beautiful thing, gives you life and strength from within, gives you power through the hard times, light in the dark times, helps your eyes find the signs. So just never let that feeling go. Your dreams are at the end of the road. You may still have to work hard, but having hope in your heart is always the best start. So never give up on hope, even when you feel choked and you feel like your life will never be the same again. This is not the end. Hope is a beautiful thing, gives you life and strength from within, gives you power through the hard times. Open, release your mind, release your mind.
I was lost in the hole of depression, crushing my dreams and suppressing my personality, falling off. I almost felt like nothing, thinking just another day. This life feels so cold and grey, how could I possibly ever get away? Then someone once said to me, in yourself you must believe. If you wanna fly over trees, I've always wanted to be free, not trapped behind bars of society. Now I'm feeling like I'm me, free to live this life, not trapped or wrapped in judgment. My decision is my mission, to control my inner vision. I take choice and make them my statement. I ain't gonna waste a second on no second guessing. So this is what I reckon. Believe in yourself and be true to yourself. Don't let no one tell you that you got no else to yourself. We got hope in this life, I put hope in my rhymes. So you're feeling what I'm saying, I ain't telling you no lies.
So Seth, welcome to our discussion on conspiracies in general. I wanted to get your opinion really on conspiracies, and maybe the main theme would be, are conspiracies a hindrance or a help in finding the truth? So we could start off maybe like that, as to whether you think they are, just your personal opinion as to whether you think conspiracies help people find the truth, or, as some people have said, they're actually a hindrance and stop, progression. When people don't trust their leaders because of things like conspiracies, then people can't move forward. I mean, I've made the point, well, actually, people don't trust the leaders because of what's happened in the past, rather than because of conspiracies. But what's your personal opinion anyway?
First, I think we need to make the difference between or make clear the difference between conspiracy and conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
Conspiracy, here's just a the basic dictionary definition, and this is just a conspiracy within criminal law or a criminal conspiracy, is an agreement between two or more persons to commit a crime at some point in the future. Period. Point blank. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Conspiracy theory, it's the word theory that makes it discreditable or whatever. It's, in my opinion, a lot of the stuff of conspiracies don't necessarily hinder you or help you there. They're just merely what it is. I mean, it's just what happened. It's history, and whether or not you choose to use that for good or bad is completely up to you. I mean, many people that will see a conspiracy or will see something like this can use it to wake up others and can be empowered by it and everything, and use it to essentially galvanize themselves out of their state of essentially sleepfulness, whatever you want to call it, their state of their zombie state, walking around of just birth, life, death sort of a thing, or birth, life, work, taxes, death sort of a thing.
Well, it seems like most people want everyone to have total acceptance of everything they're told on the news and in media and by the government. And if you don't, if you sort of hesitate and say, hang on a minute, what, could this have happened instead, or could you be lying? It's like, conspiracy theory. That's well, what, it's like, so basically it seems to have replaced the word questioning, just questioning.
Or skeptic. Literally, skeptic itself. If you're a skeptic of anything, then suddenly you're a conspiracy theorist, which is the true irony of that. But with a lot of this, I mean, you just have to have basic critical thinking skills and a memory span that goes on, let's say, or goes back longer than a few weeks. I mean, if you can have one that goes back a few months or a few years, you can spot major inconsistencies and logical fallacies in every last mainstream media outlet's coverage of any issue. I mean, you'll have one thing one week, they'll be telling you one thing, and then the next week they'll literally flip it on its head, and in both cases portray it as though it is Veritas, has always been Veritas, and will always be Veritas. A great example would be that this week scientists have said that tomatoes are bad for you and actually cause heart damage or whatever, and they'll just go bashing tomatoes and how we've always known this, and anyone that's ever been against this is crazy. And then the next week they'll have that tomatoes are actually good for heart health and actually help give you a healthy heart and a healthy lifestyle, and we'll go on for days about how just anybody that's ever been against tomatoes is stupid, and you know what I mean? It's just the same.
Well, the BBC website is the worst for that. It's constantly, every day, contradictory articles. Strenuous exercise is extremely good for you. Next day, strenuous exercise is not good for you. It's just like, I hate it.
Well,
it really
don't you
annoys
think, to a degree, that is the Orwellian process in action? Because then it gets you to think, like, at any moment, that what they declare is reality is reality. You know what I mean? Not only does it create in yourself this inability to critically think and critically analyze stuff and say, oh, well, hey, this is what they said, this is what these people said, and I'm going to think for myself what is the truth. They literally try and break you of that by destroying any sort of security or intellectual perch, any intellectual solid ground that you can have, by just constantly flipping the script over and over and over and over and over again, until finally you do have to go to those people as your source of truth there or whatever, because you're left helpless, you're left floundering in a sea of disinformation.
Unfortunately, you're left completely confused, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, I'd say, as we were talking earlier, that you have to accept everything. Unfortunately, I'd say that has become kind of pervasive in different so-called alternative or independent media outlets as well, where if you don't agree with everything I say, then you're a disinfo agent, or you're, you know what I mean, whatever. And that's the same exact sort of mentality that we need to break.
And it seems that there are different types of people. Like, there's people who tend to think, who tend to trust authority, and people who tend to mistrust authority.
Yeah. There are people that think every single thing you've ever heard is a conspiracy there, Scott. So, I mean, there are people that are paranoid or whatever, but there are also people that are completely naive and are trusting of a system that has literally said repeatedly that they view you as nothing but worthless eaters.
There's people who are naive on both sides, yeah. People, so-called truthers or conspiracy theorists who are completely naive, and just believe,
believe anything
they believe.
Or that believe anything that they believe of their specific core belief set is veritas, is the truth, and anything that anyone else believes, even if it's within the truth movement there or whatever, has got to be, just because it challenges their immediate belief system, complete garbage or disinformation. And I think that's a very human trait, and it's something that we've got to combat. And I think your audience is definitely not within that group there.
Well, let's hope not. Yeah. And you know, there's some people who see a psyop in everything. And you know what? If they do, to me, it doesn't really matter. But it's when they get aggressive about it, like when they start attacking other people and saying, you know, no, that's not true. It's a psyop, you know, and they start getting aggressive, you know.
Or that, was it Pete and I, or CIA operatives, or was it Jewish mafia operatives, or that you're a Mossad agent or something there, Scott? It's like, yeah, man, really, that's great. They try and tell you, it's like, oh, how do you get these guests on? How do you do the show? How do you do all this? As an individual, I decided to stand up. It betrays so much of this ideas of what people have in their head of weakness, of an inability of self to do anything. And the fact of the matter is, all of us are individuals, and as an individual, you have nearly limitless potential.
Yeah, and it's also down to lack of knowledge. They don't have enough knowledge about what you're doing. Like, for example, yeah, I've been accused of being Mossad because I went to Israel and I travel the world. I travel a lot. How do I do it? You know, I must be. Well, who's funding me? Well, the fact is, it actually doesn't cost much if you actually do it. You know, like I explained. It costs me $100 to jump between sort of Israel, Egypt, and Ukraine. Now that's maybe 15 years ago that wasn't possible, but it is these days. There's so many budget airlines now, you know. Yeah. And that's just it's great news for me. And also the other fact is I spend almost every penny I make on travel. That's just me. I'm a traveller, you know. So that's the other thing. It's you know, you don't have to be rich to do this. You have to make a decision as to whether this is a priority in your life, you know.
Well, you're dedicated to it, Scott. And I mean, you can attest as much as anybody there. We're doing this on a shoestring budget, literally down to, in many cases, $0.00. Sometimes near the end of the month there for a few days to a week where you literally are eating peanut butter sandwiches or whatever it is you got.
And that's absolutely true. And when I say that, I mean, there's some people who say, oh, I'm broke this week. And what they mean is, like, they've got their $50,000 in their savings account and they don't want to break into that. They're down to their last $100. But when I say I'm broke, and I am broke at the moment, I mean literally I've got I would say I've got about $10 to last me 4 days. Then I get a little bit more money being paid.
Thank God you're in Thailand. If
I'm constantly
literally
living,
would not be an option.
Yeah, I'm constantly living like that, and it's not always a good idea, but that's how I live, and I've been living like that for a while. So yeah, I'm certainly not rich. I'm completely broke, actually.
Well, that's so the true irony of all this stuff. What was a good one? The trolls there that they had of the Pete and all the guys there of you guys are like making money off of all this stuff, and literally none of us are making money. This is all off of passion, and it's just the irony there, and I think it's the easy way out for a lot of people, rather than admitting that any of this stuff is true or that any of them have the power and the potential and the responsibility, more importantly, to stand up and say something about this. They get to use the easy way out and say, oh, no, you guys are just working for the government trying to stir people up, and thus I can just go back to sleep, just cover my head up again, and, you know, it's all good. The government's here to protect me. The media is the truth. I mean, if I'm a Fox News fan or if I'm a Republican, then Fox News is the truth. If I'm a Democrat, then CNN's the truth. If I'm I'm sure in England there it's much the same. If you're a Tory or something like that, then you're much more likely to be a BBC reader, and I'm sure it's the Independent or the Guardian or something if you're more of a fan of UKIP or whatever.
I've never really understood all these labels, to be honest. You know, I mean, Republican, Democrat, Tory. You know, I've never been any of them. I'm just me, you know, and I think a lot of people are that. They're just like, they have their own opinions, but I don't know. Yeah, again, it's back down to the team mentality again. You know, are you on the Republican team or the Democrat team? And does that mean if you're on that team, you have to agree with everything that leader then says to you? Because it does seem like that. You know, when I feel worried when I see people staring up at in Barack Obama's or President
David Cameron's,
or Clinton's presidential campaign, the previous ones. Well, you get these people staring up at them, and they obviously idolize these people, and they're just clapping like
crying.
seals, you know. They're just anything they say.
In some cases, tears streaming down from their faces.
Oh
literally.
yeah,
Thank God Almighty, we got Obama in the White House. He's literally like chosen by God and all this. And it's
when you see the tears,
disgusting.
I feel almost sick because they're the same kind of tears you see from sort of, you know, previously Michael Jackson's fans and people's like that. They're crying.
Look at Kim Jong-il. When Kim Jong-il died, that is exactly what that reminds me of.
Yeah, it's the same kind of thing. It's scary. It's really scary.
It's just there the veneer has worn so thin that it's literally men with guns holding you at gunpoint and telling you to fake cry or they'll kill you. And if your fake crying isn't realistic enough, they'll kill you. Whereas here, they use it's a little bit less of a iron fist and a little bit more of a velvet glove there that they can try and use to convince you that you need to care, because if you don't care, you're a bad guy. You're one of those terrorists or thought criminals or racists or homophobes or sexists or whatever sort of just really trite term they want to use to demonize you.
Yeah, and you know, really, a lot of people who are so-called truth seekers, they just care about finding the truth, you know, and it can create disagreement.
Well, none of us are perfect, and none of us have the exact same belief system. I mean, it'd be pretty boring if we did.
It'd be boring, but it might be useful.
No, true that. But then again, that's why we've been we've been very effective in a lot of ways, but we haven't been as effective as we could be because we don't act as a monolith, as a united front, whereas many of these people, because of the cult of personality and all that, act as a united front. But I mean, we're getting off topic here and everything. We can cover that. I'm working on currently an article on patriotism and the paradox of patriotism and jingoism and everything, and then also an article on the true costs of war, of actually not only the innocence but the integrity of the society waging war on another people.
Right, yeah, and I mean, yeah, getting back to conspiracies and connecting that with war, you know, I feel like a lot of the things that we see playing out on the news are kind of little conspiracies going on in the background that we're not privy to the actual facts of what's going on in the background. It's not a, you know, transparent society. It probably never has been, but I think it's getting worse. You know, when you see things like MH370 and MH17 and other events on the news, it's probably a result of covert operations that are going on in the background. And anyone who thinks that's a conspiracy, well, what do you think the secret services are there for? What are they doing? What are all these intelligence agencies doing? Just sitting there eating donuts?
Indeed.
You know?
Well, I mean, look at Ukraine, great example of the regime change there. That itself was the product of a conspiracy on the parts of, was it Victoria Nuland and, I can't remember the guy's name, but there's quite a few U.S. State Department officials and everything, ambassadors and whatnot, involved in starting that off and sparking that off of trying to support the, the Svoboda Party and everything to try and stir up racial or ethnic animus in Ukraine, specifically in Kiev.
Yeah, and there's conspiracy theories there, you know, which seem to be borne out by some facts, or at least witnesses have saw snipers firing on both sides. Some snipers firing from one side, some from the other, and some firing on both sides. So, you know, you've got all kinds of operatives working there. So, yeah, I mean...
Indeed, and one would say government is the greatest runner of conspiracies of all, and that leads us to article on tworealnews.com right now. You have no idea how good it feels to be able to say that. But on More Than a Theory, 3 real government-run conspiracies. Been a long time coming on a lot of this there, Scott, and it's just good to know that, I don't know, that we're actually seeing some of the fruits of our labor come to, or some of the whatever, come to fruition, whatever you want to say. But now, if government were no longer run for and by the people, you'd be able to tell, right?
Right.
Right? Yeah, I mean, well, unfortunately, it seems that the large number of Americans lack the discernment to tell that or to answer that very question. Mainstream media spokespeople have long told the public to disregard conspiracy theories, what they refer to as baseless paranoid accusations by tinfoil hat-wearing lunatics. I'm sure that term sounds familiar. In fact, the ubiquity of the term conspiracy theory has led many to believe that any use of the word conspiracy carries with it an accusatory note of falsehood. Well, I can definitively say that criminal conspiracies are all too real, and that many of the, quote, theories the talking heads on the television and internet are attacking are actually the products of logical reasoning, first-hand testimony, and historical record. Here, 3 times so-called conspiracy theories involving the U.S. government proved quite real indeed. Number 1, to start this off, which is what I'm sure most people have heard of, is the COINTELPRO, the counterintelligence program, and the FBI's assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. From its inception in the modern civil rights movement, forces within the U.S. government have spent countless hours waging war on those individuals that dare become figures of dissent. The Federal Bureau of Investigation's counterintelligence program, COINTELPRO, was an illegal systematic spying, infiltration, and disruption operation run against a variety of groups, from the anti-war protesters to women's rights groups, civil rights groups like the NAACP and American Indian Movement, to socialist and communist groups, nationalist groups like the Young Lords or Movement for United Ireland, to even the Ku Klux Klan. Division was integral to the plan. The population had to be polarized on a variety of issues. Any legitimate opposition to government oppression had to be infiltrated, radicalized, and demonized, and mass protest discouraged as heavily as possible. This is, of course, all the while accompanied by the complex network of blackmail against any and all political and personal enemies of FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover. Any questions so far?
No, I'm just learning. I'm learning, taking notes.
Okay, good. Now imagine it. Constantly surveilled, phone tapped, associates, friends, and family possibly compromised. Such were the rantings of even men like Ernest Hemingway, who was long portrayed as being paranoid for saying he was stalked and harassed by the FBI, but in his case later vindicated after the Bureau released a 127-page file they'd compiled on him since 1940 in 1983, decades after his death. It's long been suggested that the stress endured during the decades of constant surveillance and harassment contributed to his suicide. Now, while COINTELPRO started in 1956, many prior targets were simply painted as, quote, communists or communist sympathizers and added to the roster of intended victims. It's probably worth adding that the news media was complicit in most of these operations and offered no real opposition to such blatant violations of law and basic morality. Those that did were either strong-armed, blackmailed, or worse, showing the true jackbooted, thuggish nature of our federal agents. Of course, the FBI wasn't the only government agency responsible for the oppression of civil rights movement and political dissidents in general. The National Security Agency, NSA, had their own program called Project Minaret to spy on all the personal communications of civil rights leaders. The Central Intelligence Agency ran its own domestic espionage program under the name Operation Chaos from 1967 to 1973. All of the information collected and quite a bit of additional fabricated information was used to wreck families, to destroy marriages, to turn best friends against each other, to obliterate the bonds of trust between members of a target organization, and to keep the American public in a constant state of ignorance about the real nature of political dissidents. And finally here, black civil rights figures like Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr., and Huey P. Newton were targeted and subsequently demonized. Many allegations exist that the FBI used COINTELPRO agents in the Nation of Islam to arrange the execution of Malcolm X, and there is more than enough actual evidence that he was targeted, spied on, harassed, threatened, and slandered. In 1999, a Tennessee civil court found the U.S. government, specifically the FBI, guilty of conspiring to assassinate Martin Luther King Jr. and setting up James Earl Ray as a patsy. This was part of the COINTELPRO sub-operation Black Hate, which just reveals more than enough by itself there of the true nature of many of these absolutely bigoted individuals, which specifically targeted Martin Luther King Jr. and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference with what they literally entitled the, quote, Ghetto Informant Program. King's family has continued to press the media to spread the news of the trial, but to date there has been a veritable mainstream media blackout. And that reps COINTELPRO up there. Any questions on that one, Scott?
No, not really. I was just thinking about. I mean, you mentioned about CIA operatives, and we know that the CIA have actually admitted that they have infiltrated the media, and they were questioned about
Project Mockingbird, Operation Mockingbird.
Operation Mockingbird, yeah, that they actually admitted they have. So, if you say, oh well, they probably got operatives working at Fox News or in CNN, or at least heavily influenced
and they have since this exact same time period, because I believe Mockingbird started in the 60s.
Yeah, so goodness knows what they're up to now. I mean, it's not a conspiracy to think some of these people are working there, because it's almost certainly true.
Oh, indeed. And then you see the demonization, even posthumously, of a lot of groups, individuals like Martin Luther King Jr., and I don't want to use any names of specific people in the so-called truth movement there, but a lot of them happen to be more of the Christian truther movement that literally use FBI files and FBI memos to try and say that Martin Luther King Jr. is all this sort of stuff that they use to demonize him, when we know for a fact that J. Edgar Hoover was not only a racist, but one of the most morally unscrupulous individuals out there, to the point that he would make up anything about people he wanted to demonize, and that their program, the whole purpose of it was to demonize people. So, I mean, to me, anybody that uses FBI documents to try and demonize any of these people really needs to check themselves, because they will be demonized similarly.
They will indeed, yeah. If you just ridicule people who are protecting some kind of human right, then you'll find out later along the line, when those guys are in prison, they'll be coming after you anyway.
Oh yeah, because it's the old saying. I mean, so hackneyed and stale as everybody said it, but it rings true over time. There, first they came for, was it the communists? But I didn't speak up, or socialists, because I didn't speak up because I was a socialist. They came for the the Labor Party people, or the union workers, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't part of the union. Then they came for the Jews. I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Jew, and then they came for me.
Yeah, that's right.
And and then there's nobody left to speak for me. And that's what we need to remember, is while we might not agree with each other on every individual thing there, the only chance any of us have is to respect and defend the right to free speech, and the right to free association, and the right to anything of this, like actual real civil rights, that if we don't defend in one another, we honestly don't even deserve them to have them ourselves, and we won't get it. It's the same thing of what's happening right now with that guy in what was it, the so-called conspiracy theorist that was calling school officials at Sandy Hook and wanting them to explain all sorts of stuff and grilling them with questions and everything. He's being charged of, criminal harassment.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the full story behind that, but that cropped up on Fox News the other day, and I don't know, but there's a possibility he might have been maybe a bit too aggressive,
No, that's true. It's just still, though.
Yeah.
They're using that to demonize the very foundations of what he's saying, to try and demonize him as an individual and the way he chose to address the information, rather than the information itself, which, as you and I know, that's an ad hominem attack and is a logical fallacy, and that's Fox News is the logical fallacy factory.
Again, a plug for our logical fallacies episode, which will be coming up after this one.
Definitely recommend people watch that one, and if you ever want to see some of the greatest logical fallacies on all time, just turn on your television. And I mean, really, once you're awake to this stuff and really start thinking critically, it becomes so apparent that these people are a bunch of bald-faced liars that it gets you angry.
It does, yeah. Fox News is perfect for that. If anyone wants his, after listening to our logical fallacies episode, go and watch Fox News and you'll have a field day spotting all the different types.
You almost just laugh, because it reaches a point where you're mad, but then it's just, oh my God, what makes you mad is that people believe it. What makes you laugh is that these people, what kind of people believe it? That is like the worst level propaganda, the most baseless accusations of stuff that even in the 1960s or 70s, in a lot of cases, would be shut down for being shoddy journalism, in literally the very definition of yellow journalism.
Yeah, and I wanted to bring up one that we did talk briefly about, and we won't go deep into it because I know it's a topic that's close to your heart. But a logical fallacy, just an example I spotted the other day, was Dr. Manny on Fox News, who was talking about the measles vaccines, and it was literally just a few minutes. Within a few minutes, they said, so there's no recorded cases in the last 10 years of any deaths through measles. There's about 200 deaths related to the measles vaccine, and Dr. Manny's logical conclusion was people who stop their kids from having the measles vaccine, should be fined. I mean, that's a huge logical fallacy, and it doesn't matter whatever you think about vaccines, and the jury's still out for a lot of people. whatever you think, that doesn't make sense, you know.
Yeah, well, just most people, I just tell them, do your own research. As it's something I said in a lot of cases, that many of the people that are defending this and mandatory vaccination and just vaccines in general will cite news articles. Most of the people that are against this and that are trying to wake people up and everything will cite actual peer-reviewed scientific studies from medical journals.
I think the important thing as well is to respect people on both sides. If you think
Well, look it up
vaccines are
yourself.
fine. You know, you go ahead and make your decisions, but you know, there's no need to have animosity between the two sides. You know,
And to try and force people into the mandatory vaccines, because
well,
that's
yeah,
something that I've heard even many people.
It's a bad idea, you know.
Yeah,
It's
well,
a
I know
very
many
bad
people
idea.
even that believe in the quote science of vaccines there or whatever would hopefully be intelligent enough to realize that once you start forcing people to do anything, it's never going to stop.
And I think some people are going down that direction, you know. And do you really want to live in society where people are going to be strapped down and enforced to have a vaccine? And that's already happened in some cases.
Yeah, and that's the start. Well, I mean, the force of taking blood at checkpoints there or whatever to make sure you're not driving drunk. I mean, just really think about that for a minute. We're allowing people to set the precedence right now for this. Where does it stop? Where does it stop? Are you literally, when people decide that for the greater good of humanity, not only that, A, we need to forcibly vaccinate you, but eventually they decide that for the greater good of humanity or for the greater good of the earth, that they just need to get rid of you, that you need to die or go to a prison camp or whatever? Because, I mean, society has spoken. It's for the greater good of the whole. And that's right there. Until we respect the rights of the individual, we will never have a truly liberal or a truly tolerant society, as though the people on the television like to make it seem as though, oh, America, they hate us for our freedoms, or they hate us because we're the last beacon of democracy, or that we're, what do they call the president, to me, the greatest joke of all time, the leader of the free world, when I don't know about you, Scott, but it doesn't quite look so free to me.
It's not. No, it doesn't. In fact, if you go to the countries that aren't supposed to be free, they don't look half bad, actually. You know, traveling around, I see a lot of countries that they seem pretty free to me. And actually, when I look back at some of the Western countries like the USA, the UK, no, we're going in the opposite direction. And some of these other countries are actually becoming more free.
Complex.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well said. Now, continuing with our second of the government-run conspiracies here. This is an interesting one that a lot of people actually, surprisingly, have never heard of. The FBI poisoning liquor during Prohibition. Another case that was once labeled a, quote, crackpot theory for literally decades was the Federal Bureau of Investigation being responsible for thousands of deaths via poisoned alcohol. From the height of the Prohibition era, at least 1926, to its end in 1933, the FBI poisoned large batches of industrial-grade alcohol, knowing full well that the alcohol was going to be stolen and then sold to unwitting customers as, quote, needle beer, a diluted concoction with a moderate alcohol content. When examining the connection between the mafia and the Bureau, it becomes apparent that there was more going on than at first meets the eye. New York's chief medical examiner in the 1920s, Charles Norris, called it, quote, our national experiment in extermination. From formaldehyde, camphor, acetone, and chloroform to methyl alcohol, a number of harmful and even deadly chemicals were added to industrial alcohol. On Christmas Eve, 1926, at Bellevue Hospital in New York, 60 victims of adulterated alcohol were admitted, 8 of whom died right there. The entire affair ended with the U.S. government being responsible for at least 10,000 deaths when Prohibition was repealed and criminals stopped stealing the spiked industrial alcohol. This is not including the hundreds of thousands made violently ill that suffered permanent negative effects ranging from liver damage to brain damage. This episode is exemplary of the fact that in spite of all the platitudes fed to the public and the, quote, well-intended clandestine operations, there seems to be no program run by the government agency that is without a body count. Also, the entire, quote, eugenics angle to the whole ordeal is quite telling, especially when considering the bigoted aspects of the first conspiracy we covered. The victims were mostly from low-income backgrounds and were considered, quote, undesirables by many eugenicists of the time, though it's interesting to see how this philosophy was carried over despite the apparent abandonment of many public eugenics programs. In this case, we're talking about many low-income Irish, low-income Italian, low-income African-American or African communities, whatever you want to call it there. If you're poor, essentially you're an undesirable. And I mean, you're drinking liquor in the first place or alcohol in the first place when it's illegal, so thus you're a criminal, you're breaking the law, so it doesn't matter if they poison you, right? I mean, it is indeed ironic, however, that a man with as many private vices as J. Edgar Hoover would feel the need to judge the private lives of others with a nigh puritanical tenacity. To elaborate, it has long been said that Hoover himself was not only a closet transvestite, but also a closet homosexual, or at very least a closet bisexual. It's claimed by biographers and historians that this information became known to the mafia and was used as blackmail against him. Quite fitting, all things considered. Normally, I wouldn't even bring up such details about someone's personal life, as it's none of my business, but it illustrates the hypocrisy of such a man stooping to spreading false rumors of the sexual proclivities of anyone that opposed him, such as Liberal Governor Adlai Stevenson, who he spread rumors of him being homosexual to try and destroy, and successfully destroy, his run or the gubernatorial elections. It's also acknowledged that he blackmailed President Franklin Roosevelt with surveillance footage of his wife, Eleanor, engaged in homosexual activity. That such a piece of hypocritical, slandering, bigot garbage could be allowed to wage a war on drinkers and purveyors of alcohol and essentially murder thousands by decree is outrageous in the extreme. As a nation, we would do well to remember that it is men and women like Mr. Hoover that are the sort of people that gravitate towards positions of power and like meddling in the affairs of others. Okay, any questions?
Well, just a few comments here. I mean, it kind of links into sort of MK Ultra and human experiments by the government. There was a case of, there's been cases of government spraying gases over cities to see what would happen. These are all factual things. They're not conspiracies. But if you were to say...
No, they are conspiracies, just not conspiracy theories.
Just not conspiracy theories, yeah. And this is the thing. I think people just want to ignore that. They don't want to accept that. In fact, I actually heard someone say the other day, when I can't remember where it was, but it was on the subject of conspiracy theories, and I heard someone say they would rather not know. They kind of know it's going on, but they'd rather not know. And I think that's the case for some people. They don't want to. They'd rather just say it's a conspiracy theory in the same vein as, I don't know, little green men from Mars or whatever. They'd rather put it in that bracket than actually looking to see whether it's true, because they're actually quite scared that it might be true.
Yeah. Well, and they use it as a way to abdicate any form of personal responsibility for any of this, which indeed is as a great man once said, responsibility is the sign of a grown man. And unfortunately, we live in a nation of little boys and little girls that would like to play games for the rest of their life, that would like to live in a, quote, a society where everything is about just being happy and doing whatever it is that makes you happy and do what thou wilt and all this type of stuff, as opposed to actually having character and to standing up for what is right. They'll tell you to never regret anything, when indeed remorse is the first step to repentance there. And they want to try and tell you to not regret anything, when indeed people that don't regret anything have no empathy or sympathy and are literally sociopaths.
They are, yeah. I mean, it's worth.
I regret the time I spent asleep here, man. I regret literally the years of my life that I feel as though were wasted in comparison to what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, well, you're doing some good, with all your news reports and educating people.
No, thank you, and that's honestly, there's nothing I'd rather be doing in this world, man, because there's so much of this that the average person, even many people like friends, family, all this sorts of stuff, as we talked about before the broadcast here, will attack me. I'm sure that you've had people that have either attacked you or just kind of try to disassociate with you. They don't necessarily want to be on bad terms with you. They want to be amicable or whatever, but they just part ways with you. And there are many people that were friends with you for decades and everything that you thought would be with you till the wheels fall off, as it were, that turn their backs on you. And there's many people like yourself there that I didn't know from Adam until, 9 months ago there. And yet now we're thick as thieves, man.
Absolutely, yeah. You might lose some friends, but you'll make some new ones,
Well, people that actually matter. I mean, I've met many of these people that would give me the shirt off their back, not knowing me from literally a stranger there for about a month. Whereas many people that I've known for the longest of times, that I've considered some of my best friends, wouldn't give me a glass of water if I was dying in the desert. So let's not let's not pretend that everything is quite how it seems. But going off on our last conspiracy here, government-run conspiracy, this is U.S. government drug running. So I'm feeling this is going to be an interesting one for you there, Scott. Have you heard anything about this?
No, I'm waiting to take notes again. Listen to you.
Okay, good. This is by far the longest of any of the sections we've got here, with the most links to it and everything. Though military and government whistleblowers have long tried to raise awareness of the issue, Gary Webb's investigation and reporting on Central Intelligence Agency corruption and involvement in smuggling and distributing narcotics through gangs and using the profits to fuel guerrilla armies in Latin America fully exposed the government-run drug trade to the public. During the 1980s, CIA agents supported Nicaraguan Contras in their fight against the Nicaraguan government. The Contras in question also happened to be involved in cocaine smuggling operations, which the agency gladly oversaw, expanded, and used to help fund other Contras and other, quote, black projects. The cocaine was smuggled, in some cases even so obviously as to be transported in CIA jets by the ton, to third-party middlemen, who distributed the product to criminal gangs. The profits, being completely off the record, were used to further fund not only the Nicaraguan Contras, but a series of other rebel groups, cartels, and puppet governments in Central and South America. This activity was exposed to the masses in 1996 by the groundbreaking work of one of the finest investigative journalists in U.S. history of our time, Gary Webb. Gary, along with a number of other sources, including the now famous drug dealer, turned whistleblower Freeway Ricky Ross, began exposing the operation through a series of investigative reports for the San Jose Mercury News. Webb's sources included Nicaraguan drug smugglers Oscar Danilo Blandon and Norwin Meneses, LA drug dealer Freeway Ricky Ross, and Coral Baca, one-time girlfriend of infamous Nicaraguan drug dealer Rafael Cornejo. According to an interview with Huffington Post, quote, during her interview with HuffPost, Baca recounted meeting Contra leader Adolfo Calero multiple times in the 1980s at Contra fundraisers in the San Francisco Bay Area. He would personally pick up duffel bags full of drug money, she said, which was her job to count for Cornejo. There was no question, she said, that Calero knew exactly what the money, how the money had been earned. Meneses' nickname, after all, was El Rey de las Drogas, the King of Drugs. Of course, these claims are ridiculed, or were ridiculed by the mainstream media as being, quote, delusional conspiracy theories and, quote, absolutely baseless accusations, despite the evidence. The government made up a conscious effort to destroy Gary Webb's journalistic career and was fairly successful. He ended up resigning from the Mercury News rather than put up with being under close editorial supervision, what I call censorship, in response to pressure from the CIA. Even in the face of tremendous pressure against him, the Northern California branch of the Society of Professional Journalists voted Webb Journalist of the Year. Subsequent reports from the House Committee and the CIA itself both found that, quote, the CIA had no connection to Ross Blandon or Meneses. These obviously biased investigations were meant to, quote, further discredit Webb, and unfortunately for a while it worked. In the years since his death, prominent figures involved in the scandal have since come forward and vindicated him. Webb's dedication to exposing the unpleasant truths behind the government's illegal and immoral actions cost him his life in 2004. According to all official reports, he committed suicide in his home on December 10th with two bullet wounds in his head. Foul play was not suspected. Now, aside from the obvious question of how a man shoots himself in the head twice, there is also a question of why would the media not question the obviously incongruent official statement? The answer is simple. Many mainstream media personalities are already completely sold out to their corporate and government masters, but some of those that weren't were sent a message with the, quote, suicide. This was already illustrated earlier in this article. The government will kill and has killed to keep its misdeeds secret. Some of the more obstinate readers might just ask, but if they're so dangerous, why are you still alive? The simple answer to that information is that the information is already out there. They've killed the messenger, a damning act in and of itself. To pile up more bodies at this point just draws even more attention to the scandal, though I'm sure if I were viewed as a big enough threat, they would have no hesitation in kidnapping, torturing, or killing me. After all, it is legal through the National Defense Authorization Act of 2011. In a more, quote, modern context, government-run drug trafficking has reached unprecedented heights in Afghanistan, where U.S. military personnel literally guard the opium plantations of insider groups. The illicit connections have even been shown much closer to home. CIA agents have been shown to be connected with the Los Zetas and other Hispanic groups that are Hispanic gangs that have been created from the remnants of the original Central American Contras, MS-13. When we add scandals such as the ATF gunwalking scandal, Fast and Furious, to the conversation, we get a clear picture of what the government is really all about. The history we already know, and the slew of documents being declassified in recent years, combined with the arrogance and vituperous attitude of these government agencies, show that they are no more than taxpayer-funded criminal organizations hell-bent on self-perpetuation and an ever-increasing budget, and that they are not above lying, blackmailing, stealing, and murdering to attain those goals. This is arguably the most heinous of the 3 government-run conspiracies we've covered and has racked up the highest body count by far. So in conclusion, there you have it. Undeniable proof that truth is stranger than fiction, and oftentimes there's much more substance to conspiracy theories than the official government-endorsed narrative. Think critically, make your own decisions, and above all, do not trust the government or the bought and paid for corporate prostitute media. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Seth. That was great. Yeah, I mean, a lot of these files that you mentioned there, they're kept closed until a period of time when people no longer care, it seems to me.
Or that it's so obvious and in the public's scrutiny there, and has been put out to people for so long that at that point to cover it up anymore actually makes them look worse than if they were to just acknowledge it and put a what's called a limited hangout or a positive spin on it.
Yeah, I mean, if we could propel ourselves 100 years into the future, it'd be interesting to see what we could look back on, and they would look right down as history, which we would be shocked by, that people admitting this is true, but people just wouldn't care in the future. You know, if you said, for example, say Princess Diana was murdered, or David Kelly in the UK, who was involved in the intelligence before the Iraq War, and some people believe was assassinated, but again it was put down as suicide. Oh,
indeed, and just think Barack Obama will be the Nobel Peace Prize winner and the great bringer of peace of our time. Just think, Al Gore will be considered the father of the modern climate change movement and everything, and that green is the new way to go. And just really think about it, Scott, how many lies, bald-faced lies that are accepted right now that will be accepted if we allow them to be into the history books in the future. And that's something that's important, because then it makes you look back upon what we consider human history right now. And it makes you start looking at that much more critically, because you realize the stranglehold on information that the elite have had, or that the government agencies, or whatever you want to call them, lords and ladies, counts, whatever, man, kings and queens and guillotines and all that wonderful stuff. It doesn't matter if we're talking 2000 BC or 2015 AD. I mean, it's the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Yeah, right. And I was going to say it's good to question, to keep these people on their toes as well. I mean, it could turn out that some of the conspiracy theories they may be not accurate, what some people think, but it doesn't matter. Generally, I think it's good to have a healthy mistrust of government, because they're proven liars. So it's good to question, basically. And I was going to mention Bin Laden as well as an example of, there's a lot of conspiracies flying around about Bin Laden, and is it any wonder? What I want to say is it any wonder when you look at what we're presented with? I mean, sure, they could have gone in and they could have killed Osama bin Laden, as they said, on that particular day in his compound. But there's just things that don't feel right. There's inconsistencies and just things that don't feel right. And alarm
from
bells.
The fact that this Operation Cyclone, of what we have declassified of this guy actually being used as the hornet's nest there, or whatever you want to say, to stir up Afghanistan against the Russians. Which is, I mean, the whole reason that Russia was even provoked into invading Afghanistan is because of Islamic extremism promoted by the United States to try and topple the secular socialist government that was already in Afghanistan at the time. Which, well, look, we can get into the political ideologies of what you feel, what you don't feel, or whatever. The fact of the matter is, it is not the responsibility, it is not the right, and it is wrong for the United States or any other world government to tamper with other people's governments around the world. Period. Point blank.
Yes.
End of story.
And, if you look at that raid, if we're to believe everything did go down as it said, well, why did they kill... The story changed like 6 times, too. Why did they kill an unarmed man, then?
Yep. Well, at first, that's what I'm saying, the inconsistencies. They had him armed, they had him using his wife as a human shield, and they didn't have him using his wife as a human shield. Then they just shot him, then they didn't just shoot him, he tried shooting them, and then they shot him. They had the inconsistencies of like the exploding helicopter at the time there and everything, and they could only take out one helicopter. There's the thing of them burying his body at sea, saying it's Islamic custom when it's not Islamic custom.
Well, it's not an Islamic custom. And the question I would say is, why would they do that? Would they? So they're telling us they buried him at sea as a sign of respect, but then on the other hand,
for the most hated man in the world that they literally demonize constantly, even to the point here in the U.S. you can buy targets for target practice there of zombie Osama bin Laden or whatever, still to this day.
And we're constantly told, no, these people are not real Muslims. They're just, they're using that as an excuse. So then why would you give him an Islamic burial then?
When it's not even an Islamic burial. That's the
it's not an Islamic burial. He's not supposed to be a real Muslim, so why are you giving him that respect anyway?
Because if he allegedly died when they said he died, then he'd literally set a world record for the longest rate of survival of a human being on dialysis, which I understand we're talking a rich individual, but we're talking a rich individual that's supposedly running around living in caves in the Middle East and going back and forth from Pakistan to Afghanistan to even Iraq there or whatever, supposedly, to even Saudi Arabia, and yet unless this guy's living in the most modernized hospital imaginable, there is not even a chance that he could live that long. And even in a modern hospital, there's a reason he would still be considered a world record holder for living the longest whilst on dialysis.
Yeah, I mean, there were reports that he died years previously.
Yeah, well, Benazir Bhutto said that on television before her assassination. And I think that's kind of an interesting thing.
Conspiracy theory for you, isn't it? Yeah.
Yep, you got it right there.
And I think it's just healthy to question, because if you don't, these tyrants can get away with anything. If you're just going to be gullible and let them
well, people will say overthinking is bad or whatever. Or you just think about this too much, or you just get into stuff that you can't control, or you any of this is like what your problem is that you overthink stuff. It is too much of this. I was watching an episode of on the Netflix there, that Frasier the other day, and they had that was his big problem, is he overthinks stuff. And I've noticed this in most pop culture, that they promote this idea that don't think, just be. Don't think, just be. And have you noticed that, Scott? That kind of raising people to be sociopaths, raising people to have not only no real responsibility for themselves and their actions, but to just not give a rat's ass about other human beings, about the real problems that we're facing in this world, and about doing something about it.
Well, I've just noticed really the shallowness of society. Really, things on Twitter that get hundreds and hundreds, thousands, even millions of hits, which are completely stupid. And then someone can say something profound that has deep
world-changing
level profoundness, and it won't even get a second look. And it's kind of sad. It's sad. It's a sickness in society.
And I think it's promoted by them, I say them, of the people that control media outlets of whatever you want to say. To some people it's the corporate elite or the satanic elite or whatever. To some people it's just big business in general trying to demonize any sort of real human activity to keep you in a place of perpetual unhappiness, so that you view consumerism as your only saving grace there or whatever. But as you brought up, it's just shallowness. It's literally all I want to do is to go to work or go to school or whatever, come home and have fun. God didn't put you here, or to those of you that don't believe there, you were not born onto this planet. You were not, the universe didn't give birth to you, or whatever. Honestly, man, you can believe whatever you want. You are not here to just have fun and to, you know what I mean, to just do what thou wilt, and to just be all about carnal pleasures and immediate self-gratification and all this type of stuff, or self-aggrandizement. You're here to do what is right. You're here to be a great human being. You're here to change the world in a positive manner. And I can only imagine the disappointment of the creator there, or whatever you want to say, of God in his creations there, than of just not doing anything. Of all the potential you as an individual have for action. I mean, you know this, Scott, 100%, of what you were doing before versus what you're doing now, of the potential you have to make a real difference here, to actually be somebody that shakes people into wakefulness, that empowers people to feel as though that they can do this themselves, and that they're not just weak, to help people realize that consumerism is not the key to happiness, to realize that all these political ideologies they're putting out there, that all the social ideologies they're putting out there mean nothing but division. All they're to do is to keep you distracted from the bigger picture.
Well said. Yeah, I mean, we all have the power to change things, basically, and yeah, it's okay to have fun. You know, we can have fun. In fact, you're likely to have more fun if you start trying to be as good a person as you can to spread, share and help people. You're likely to have a lot more fun that way, anyway.
Indeed. Someone once said, most things that bring happiness first, bring pain and bring sadness first, and that's what a lot of this. I think is the relativity there too of. I mean, just between you and I there, Scott, of covering a lot of these dark and sobering subjects of talking about stuff like human trafficking or government conspiracies or the amount of people been murdered by this in war and everything like that. A lot of these can be very discouraging, very disheartening, but at the same time, you see the good in the world for what it truly is, of what's good, what is innocent, what is wholesome, what is worth defending as being worth defending. It galvanizes you to be in the arena, to no longer just be a spectator, to realize that there is such a thing as good or evil or right and wrong, that there is such a thing as wholesomeness, that what is right and what is innocent is worth defending rather than what simply makes you happy in the immediate. Because so many people, I mean, if it's all about what makes you happy, then every single day just go to work, come home, crack a beer, and watch Jon Stewart, man, or watch Bill Maher or whatever it is. And there are so many people out there that I think that that's all they intend to ever do, is to just that same old cycle of what we said of birth, life, work, taxes, indoctrination, death. And to think that there are people that live their whole lives like this, to me, it is quite sad, as I would rather die, let's say, prematurely there, not from old age, as a man standing up for what is right, than to simply sit on my couch and die an old man of atrophy, of just being a spectator my whole life and realizing that the world has passed me by without me actually making a difference.
Also, if you do completely nothing, you may have fun for a while, and you may be able to close your eyes to what's going on around you. But eventually, if you let these people in power go unchecked, you'll soon find out that they won't allow you to be free and have fun, and it'll be too
Indeed,
late.
They're just using it right now to keep you in a place of, or in a state of complacency, in a state of almost a zombie-like state of immediate self-gratification or instant gratification, just over and over and over and over again, to the point that you're not resisting them. But then, as you just said, most people need to remember that by the time that this is all said and done, there will be no instant gratification. There will be none of this. They will eventually take that too. And I hate to be crass here, but it's like the George Orwell quote of these people will eventually abolish the orgasm. After creating all this stuff of instant gratification there and everything, of hypersexualizing society, I believe Daryl Hamamoto, the professor who does a wonderful job of covering this, is hypersexualizing society to desexualize it in the long run. It's the same of popularizing drug culture and everything like that, to eventually create a group of people that have no interest in any of this in the long run.
That's probably an excellent point to finish on, banning orgasms. Yeah. That's a great way to finish. I have to thank you for joining us again
you're very
today,
welcome,
Seth.
Scott. Anytime I can help you, I know we're going to be doing a lot more to be working on the first few episodes here for Truth Sentinel. Anytime you want to set something up, a discussion and everything, just let me know. It's been a pleasure joining you and your audience. God bless and have a great day.
Thank you, Seth. And just a reminder to people, they can catch, if they type in 2 Real News in Google, they'll find Seth's website, and they can also catch him on Shake and Wake Radio as well.
Yep, and of course your stuff there as well, Scott, is on the 2realnews.com. No www, just 2realnews.com. And was it Top Bar? They've got Home, 2 Real News, and then Truth Alliance. Average Liberator, Truth is Stranger Than Fiction, Truth Radio, and your very own Truth Sentinel. All episodes are uploaded there constantly, and once you start uploading the second season, I'll have them up as they come.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for that, Seth. And it sounds like your dog's hungry again.
Oh, yes, I'll go take care of that. God bless you. Have a great day, brother.
Yeah, you too, man. Catch you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.